All right, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for coming to today's policy session of the Phoenix City Council for March 24th, 2015. It appears not here at the dais, but soon. There we go. Okay, we have a quorum of the City Council. We'll begin today's policy session, as we do all of our policy sessions, asking council members if they have any information and/or follow-up requests that we'd like to ask our city manager or the public. Councilwoman Williams.
Mayor, I have some thank yous I'd like to do first. I want to thank Laura Robbins and the Black Mountain Community Alliance board members, Leroy, Goldie, Chuck, Karen, Jill, Candace, and Charlene, who organized a very successful crime prevention and safety event on March 14th. I also want to put out a very special thank you to Anita Borum. She's been the director at the Helen Drake Senior Center. She's been with the city for 40 years, and she is retiring. She has been a very motivated person, a huge advocate for seniors and senior programming. And what I always admired about her is she was never afraid to take a risk. If she saw a problem, she'd get on the phone and let us know right away. She was one of those people that asked forgiveness rather than permission, but she made things so much better. So I just want to wish her a long and happy retirement. I was at Luft Air Force Base last week at the community meeting, and Brigadier General Scott Playas was the first trainee in the F-35, and he was almost giddy about the experience. He learned to fly on a simulator in South Carolina. He said you get in the plane and it practically flies itself. In May, the formal training for pilots will begin, and it's going to be a combination of Australian pilots as well as U.S. pilots. So everybody's geared up, excited, and ready to go out there. Coming up this Friday is the District 1 breakfast at 7:30 at the Deer Valley Airport. Ed Zucker will be our guest speaker. Thank you, Ed. And I just want to remind everybody, next week we start the budget hearings at Buff Community Center. It will be April 1st. It's at 6 p.m. And I think Councilman Jim Waring is there. And then on April 2nd is the Helen Drake Senior Center at 6 p.m. And I believe Vice Mayor Valenzuela will be there with us. So that's all I have, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councilwoman. Other members of the council, Councilwoman Pastor.
Good afternoon. This Sunday is the Encanto Palmcroft Historic Home Tour and Street Fair from 10 to 4. We have aviation meetings. We had one on Monday, and we will have one Thursday, March 26th at Cesar Chavez High School, Saturday, March 28th at Burton Bar Central Library, Wednesday, April 1st at Hope 6, and then our budget meetings start, and that will be Tuesday, April 7th. We'll have the community budget hearing at Phoenix College, and then Wednesday, April 8th, we'll have a joint community budget hearing with Districts 4, 5, and 7, and 8, and it will be a bilingual budget hearing. In addition to that, anybody that is watching or anybody that is here, I am collecting, helping Maritza Lopez on our 3rd annual Dress for Success clothing drive. So anybody that has any suits, any type of professional blouses, professional handbags, shoes, unused stockings, jewelry, that would be great if you can donate. You can come to my office, and there will be a box there where you can donate your Dress for Success clothing. We're collecting it for nonprofits, those nonprofits that help the women enter into the job market and into the workforce, and those are some of the good things that are happening. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councilman. That's a great effort. I appreciate that. Vice Mayor, do you have any comments?
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. A lot of good stuff happening in this entrepreneurial ecosystem we have right here in the city of Phoenix. Last week, we welcomed VA Angels into Phoenix. VA Angels is an angel investment group, one of the more successful ones from Canada and expanded into the United States, and of all places, right here in Phoenix. I welcomed them along with many partners in our ecosystem. It's not just city government, but GPEC and the ACA and other leaders from these co-working spaces and accelerators, incubators, all welcomed Randy Lennon and the VA Angels. And of course, I had the honor to do that along with Mayor Stanton and of course, Councilwoman Gallego, as VA Angels will be housed in, at CEI in District 8. And that's just, it's exciting. It's good for all of us as we continue to move down this path of 5K, 5Y. I believe by supporting this ecosystem, we will gain 5,000 new enterprises in the next 5 years. I know it sounds like a lofty goal, but I tell you, listening to Randy Lennon, the gentleman who brought VA Angels into Phoenix at the press conference, for him to say, you know, one of the reasons that brought us here is this 5K, 5Y thing. And I want to be part of a city that has these types of goals. It's just really, really exciting. Another incubator has come to, co-working space has come to the city of Phoenix, and that is GameCo Lab, which is very exciting. This is for all of the gamers. It's not just video games. There's so much to it. There's the, you know, they're working with the Art Institute as one partner, but several others. They'll be connecting with some of our higher education institutions. It's not just developing something like a video game, for an example, but it's marketing it, it's selling it, and there's just so much that goes into it. And they are fortunate enough to be right there in District 3 with Councilman Bill Gates, and they're just excited about the location there. And I know Mayor Stanton made it out for the grand opening as well. Right before this policy meeting, I was just at Grand Canyon University for the GCU Canyon Challenge, which, for those of you who have ever seen the show Shark Tank, that's pretty much what it is. A couple of judges included Jerry Colangelo and Brian Mueller, the president of GCU, and several others that we're just fortunate to have right here in the Valley. But this was the finals. This was, you know, 5 ideas that were pitched in about 5 minutes, and you know, real prizes, money was offered, which really helps with the startup cost. And again, just having that right here in the city of Phoenix, it's exciting. GCU is not the only one. ASU is doing amazing things with SkySong, and of course the U of A and the Maricopa County Community Colleges, on and on. So a couple more announcements. The VIP cleanup, the Violence Impact Project. I talked about the 27th Avenue project before. We've been working on it for quite some time now. In District 5, there, you know, we have quite a few issues on 27th Avenue that really needs to be approached from a multifaceted standpoint, not just police, but also NSD and the prosecutor's office and county attorney's office and on and on. That collaborative, human services has been huge in this project. So bringing that and announcing it for the first time on February 26th, and this is going to be ongoing. You know, just again, having this collaboration together to wipe out this problem, these issues that we're having, working directly with the business owners in the area, and of course the neighborhood leaders in the area. We have a big cleanup event happening this Saturday, the 28th, and for those who'd like to participate, they can call the District 5 office at 602-262-7446. I'd appreciate it. And the bike safety events, I know we've had several throughout the city. We have 3 of them happening throughout District 5 just on Saturday alone, and we'll be out and about doing that. One of the places will be the Brett Tarver Elementary School, and another would be Washington Park, and so this is just all about, you know, exercise, but also doing it the right way, promoting bike helmets and of course, even training wheels if that's what it takes for some of our riders. And lastly, the spring festival, the Fuerza Local and Local First Arizona is coming together. This is not the first time this has happened, but once again, over at Del Sol Furniture on 83rd Avenue and Indian School in District 5, we'll have another festival supporting local businesses. Many of these businesses in the Latino community, many of them are in District 5 that we've continued to work with. And it's just really, it's great to see the growth in these businesses. That begins at 10 a.m. on Saturday. You are all welcome to come out. It's always a lot of fun. We'll have more than 40 vendors there. 2,500 people are expected. Approximately 2,500 people are expected. And I really want to thank Del Sol Furniture and especially Fuerza Local and Local First Arizona, because they've done so much work to help keep this network together and help our economy move forward as well.
Thank you very much, Vice Mayor. Former Vice Mayor?
Former Vice Mayor. No, I'm good.
All right, good. Councilwoman?
Thank you so much. First of all, I want to welcome the many women in the audience today and look forward to hearing from you in the next agenda item. You can fill out a comment card if you do want to speak before the meeting, and you don't have to be a Phoenix resident if you're interested in sharing some information or a story. Although we are talking about equal pay and the focus has been on women, the city is also doing a lot for all different demographics. And we are participating in the President's My Brother's Keeper Challenge, which is improving outcomes, particularly for young men, but for all young people, and including young men of color. And the Arizona Community Foundation has a venture fund that has launched online grants applications for people and nonprofits who want to help with that initiative, and we would welcome people who want to advance the city's participation in My Brother's Keeper to pursue that funding opportunity. Very exciting. Also want to thank Police Chief Yonner for coming out to the South Mountain area and speaking with our residents about public safety. They really enjoyed having him out. And yesterday I was part of a group from Phoenix who joined the city of Mesa as they celebrated station installation. So their light rail extension is moving forward quickly, and it was very exciting to be out there. We drove past the Sycamore station at 2 p.m. and it was packed, so with a really diverse group of people of all ages using the station. So congratulations to Mesa on their forward motion in that particular area. We have a busy series of meetings coming up. Councilwoman Pastor mentioned the FAA noise meetings and had the ability to attend last night and learn a lot. Tomorrow night we have a coffee with our council office at Jerry's Restaurant on 24th and Thomas. And we also have several budget hearings coming up. And then this Saturday, Councilman Nowakowski and I will celebrate a major groundbreaking at Cesar Chavez Park that includes the dog park and amphitheater. And four-legged Phoenicians are welcome to join us at that as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Councilman. Councilman?
Thank you, Mayor. First of all, I just want to really thank all those individuals that went out last Friday to the movie in the park, especially Portland at the Park and our Parks and Rec department and Burton Bar Library for their support. It was successful. We had over 200 people out there, and the kids were running around and having a good time. So thank you for a great event. Also, I'd like to thank our airport staff for really reaching out to the community. These meetings that on the FAA and the noise monitors, they're not sponsored by the FAA. It's actually sponsored by our Sky Harbor staff. So I really want to thank the staff for reaching out and keeping the community informed. The information that they shared yesterday was very information. The people loved the information, especially with the noise monitors. And I think it's information that really helps out the communities. And we had a real live debate yesterday, and we had Council Member Gallegos with us, and it was lively. It was pretty good. And the other thing is, I like to remind everyone that March 31st is Cesar Chavez's birthday. It's a day off on the city's calendar, but it's really day on. It's a day on giving back to the community, serving one another. So get involved. get your children involved in cleaning up their neighborhoods. We have graffiti busters out there that you can actually call up, and we'll give you the material that you need, the paint, the brushes, the rollers to paint out graffiti. So it's really an opportunity to show your young ones how to get involved and how to clean up their neighborhoods. And lastly, I really want to thank Councilmember Gallegos for her support of getting a dog park out at Cesar Chavez Park. The groundbreaking, as she said, is going to be this Saturday, so we expect everyone to come on out and turn some dirt with us, and it's going to be an exciting time for the Laveen area. Oh, one more thing, Mayor, I almost forgot. This weekend, from Friday through Sunday at Margaret Hans Park, we're going to be having a McDowell Mountain Music Festival. So come on down and enjoy the music. Tons of people in downtown Phoenix. If you haven't been in downtown Phoenix lately, you got to come down. It's different. It's revived and all kinds of young people. And with this music festival, it's really just energizes downtown. So come on down on Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you very much, Councilman, for mentioning that. That music festival used to be in a different city and has chosen the last few years to come to downtown, and the fan experience has been awesome. Councilman DeCiccio?
Thank you, Mayor. Just a few announcements here. It's going to be a pretty busy next couple of weeks, especially with the budget hearings and then other meetings that we've got throughout the district. It's pretty packed. I was thinking about this. I thought, gosh, we got Easter coming up, and we've already got back-to-back meetings all the way through, and right after that, it seems like we hit the road running pretty hard. That's for everybody up here on the council. Oh, before I even get started on that, any chance, Mayor, we can kind of go into like a tie-less period here, where when Paul Johnson was mayor, he pushed for that. Is there any way we can kind of put, everyone knows how much I love wearing a tie. I don't. But one of those things. Yeah, summer thing. But just something to think about if we could ever head toward that. The other,
Manager, do we require ties at the city? I think each professional is able to make their own determination. I don't think we actually have a formal
we do?
A policy relative to ties. So I'll leave it to the city manager. But certainly, I don't think we. I think we trust our professionals to dress appropriate for the day that they have, the meetings that they have. So I'll leave it up to our city manager to make a determination whether we need a formal policy for city employees. And of course, each council member can dress the way they feel most comfortable. Go ahead, Councilman.
All right. Well, thanks, Mayor. Well, obviously, I wear the polo shirts and matter of fact, my daughter, who just loves wearing ties, she buys me these ties. She's amazing at it. She's actually 10 years old and has this incredible good taste on clothing. But she helps me get out these really nice ties and has me bring them. So I have to bring them because I told her I would, but I don't like to wear them. You know, there's a difference. I told her I would bring it. I want to make sure, Amelia, if you're listening to this, which I hope you're not and you're doing your homework, but in any respect, when you were talking about the dog parks, one of the things with Councilwoman Gallego and Nowakowski, you're going to find them to be incredibly successful. These dog parks that are out there really started, kicking them up a few years ago, and they've been incredibly successful. I want to thank staff for all that they do on that. It was a hard push trying to get it done, because when you take an area from a park, you're taking it away from someone else. At least that's their position on it. But it's been incredibly successful here at the city, so I think it's fantastic you're working on it. And the other is I want to congratulate you on the work, in particular, Councilman Nowakowski, at the Margaret Hans Park that's coming up. That is a big win for you. It's a big win for the city of Phoenix, and it's going to be a big win for the downtown as well. So congratulations on really making that dream come through for you. A couple quick things. One, I've got someone living in the district, Sylvia Noble. I don't know if you know her. She's a famous author. She released her first movie after 17 years of work called Deadly Sanctuary yesterday in, I believe, Councilwoman Williams' district at Deer Valley Theaters. Was that yours? Well, they brought in all these actors and actresses from out of state and literally come here and opened up a movie. It was fantastic for the state of Arizona. It was all filmed here. Everything was filmed here, but congratulations to her as well. She's written, I think, probably 7 or 8 mystery books, and very popular author. I ran into people I knew there that I didn't even know were interested in that type of literature. But let me cover the meetings we're going to have. This Wednesday, April 1st, the District 6 community hearing is going to be at Pecos Community Center. That's our very first budget hearing. I think it's the first one of the city as well. 6 p.m., District 6 community budget hearing at the Pecos Community Center. The next one is going to be in the northern part of the district on April 15th at 5:30 p.m., and it's going to be our district budget hearing at the Madison District Office. I'm encouraging the public to come out to both of those, give us your opinion. You're going to see the budget today. At the same time, be able to give us your opinion, what you think we should or should not be doing, if you think our priorities are in the right direction. Easter Parade. I get the honor this year to be in the Kiwanis-Ahwatukee Easter Parade and Spring Fling, to be the master of the parade. Oh, wow. Well, yeah, it's kind of cool. We have about 15,000 people that come out to that at least.
Are you going to wear a tie?
No, I won't. I'll probably be wearing shorts and a polo shirt. I'll try to look nice and presentable. And it'll be ironed, so that'll be required. But yeah, that's the Easter Parade. Then we have another one, same on actual Easter Sunday. The Kiwanis is on April 4th. Then we have another one April 5th, the Mountain View Baptist Easter service, and that's going to be at Mountain View Baptist Church. So then that's going to start at 7 a.m. So I encourage people to bring your family out there. It's an incredible event. These things are fantastic, where you can bring your children out there. People get to throw candy out. It's just a really fun event. It leads up to a really good time for Easter as well as a lead into the Easter holidays. And everyone be safe for Easter. We're not going to have another meeting until after that. So be safe out there. Do everything that you can to keep your family safe, and watch. Be careful on the roads as well. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you very much, Councilman. Councilman Pastor, one additional thing?
Yes, I completely forgot. The Phoenix Public Library is the finalist for the Museum and Library Service. It's the highest honor given to the museums and libraries. So right now what we are requesting is that everybody that has a story that has happened within your library, please go to phoenixpubliclibrary.org and there's more information there so that they can guide you to where you can write your story. It's about how many stories they get in order to get the honor and receive the award. So we're trying to push everybody to write their story of what has happened within the library, or what greatest moment you've had. For me, the library was a place where I went to explore, since reading was not something that I loved to do, and it wasn't a passion, and it was really hard for me as a child. And so it was a teacher who inspired me just to go to the library and explore the books, and so that's really where it started for me. I still am a slow reader, so it takes me time, but I love to read. And so anybody that has wonderful stories, please post. We need all of them. So thank you. And then,
well, please.
Saturday and Sunday at Enchanted Island, April 4th and 5th, there will be a huge Easter egg hunt. And so those of you that are interested, please attend and go. It's over, Councilman Nowakowski, how many?
There's actually going to be 20,000 plastic eggs, yeah.
Please go if you want to take your children for an Easter egg hunt. Parking will be difficult, so please take light rail.
Done. All right, thank you very much, Councilman. That is a fun Easter egg hunt. Councilman Gates.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I saw Chief Kalkbrenner over there, and I just wanted to make sure to say thank you very much to the fire department for saving the pro shop at Maryvale Golf Course earlier this week. Again, great work, and I think a lot of us spent a lot of time out there over the years, and a lot of great memories. A lot of people learned how to play the game of golf out at Maryvale, so thanks for the great work by the fire department. I was fortunate enough to have the opportunity to be a part of the St. Patrick's Day Parade with Councilman Nowakowski. It was a lot of fun, perfect weather. It was actually almost hot, but Phoenix is hot, right? So that's okay. And a lot of fun out there. Thanks to everyone who participated in that parade. And then on just last Saturday, we had a wonderful North 32nd bike ride, which has become our annual event. Huge crowd out there. Want to thank Basha's for providing all the donuts. And Johnny Basha actually came up and Basha's has been very supportive of our revitalization efforts up on North 32nd. I wanted to make sure to thank my Chief of Staff, Laura Etter, and everyone in the office for all the hard work they put into that event. And thank you very much, City Manager Ed Zerker, for coming up as well. next year when we do it, we'll have those new bike lanes in on North 32nd. So we're really looking forward to that, and also all the folks who participated in the bike rodeo. A lot of kids out there. A lot of kids got some new bike helmets as well. So it was about having a good time and also about safety. We have several meetings coming up in the near future in District 3 as well. We have our monthly coffee chat. The April coffee chat will be on Tuesday, April 7th in Sunny Slope at Accurate Signs and Engraving. For those of you who know Jim Mapstead, that'll be at his new digs on Central, so we're looking forward to that. And there was a lot of discussion about the Phoenix Industrial Development Authority last week, so we thought it'd only be appropriate to have Juan Salgado come out from the IDA and talk in more detail about all the great stuff that the IDA does in our community. We'll also be doing budget hearings, our first one, and no, it isn't an April Fool's joke, but we will be having a budget hearing on April 1st with our new Vice Mayor Valenzuela. Looking forward to that in Sunny Slope at the Sunny Slope Community Center from 7:30 to 8:30 a.m. And then on April 8th, Councilman Waring and I will be doing a budget hearing from 6 to 7 p.m. at the Paradise Valley Community Center. Also, on April 11th, always a big event in Sunny. It's like the Sunny Slope week, but we'll be doing the Sunny Slope Art Walk at Central and Dunlap, and we'll also be doing the unveiling of the new arts project on Hatcher Road. So again, that's the evening of April 11th. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you very much, Councilman. Anything else by members of this council? I'll just add, this is my favorite time of the year. I love basketball. I love college basketball, and I want to congratulate Coach Charlie Turner Thorne and the ASU women's basketball team. They had a great comeback win last night. They are in the Sweet 16. They're going to beat Florida State on March 27th. They've been an awesome team to watch all year. Been in the top 10 nationally throughout most of this season. Really brought pride to our region. With that, Mr. City Manager, we are hosting the men's Final Four in 2017. Couldn't be more excited about that. Maybe you and your team could find out what it would take for us to apply to host the women's Final Four and bring it before this council and see if this council would like to put the time, energy, and resources to see, because the men's game will be out in Glendale, but the women's game could be right here in downtown Phoenix at Talking Stick Arena. It would be awesome to bring top-level athletes to downtown Phoenix for the women's Final Four, and I know we'd be successful if we made that effort. I also wanted to highlight that next April 2nd, I will declare a proclamation that it is Everyone Matters Day in the city of Phoenix. 22 cities around the country are declaring this Everyone Matters Day, and they're adding a little bit of a twist to it this year. They're asking people in the community to take a selfie and on that day and load it up to #IM, and then you fill in the blank, and you can describe yourself any way you would like, but to show that everyone in this community, all people of all ages, shapes, sizes, backgrounds, income levels, everyone matters in our city. So April 2nd will officially be Everyone Matters Day in the city of Phoenix. Take that selfie. I cannot wait to see what Jim Waring puts on his selfie.
Mayor, I wasn't going to do this, but how did Marquette and Michigan do this year?
Okay, next season. Next season. Thank you. Yeah. Tough crowd. All right. With that, we'll move on to the remainder of our agenda. Vice Mayor, do we have a call for an executive session? That was cold-blooded right there.
Mayor, in accordance with the properly posted notice and agenda, I move that the City Council, pursuant to Arizona Revised Statute Section 38-431.02.A, meet in executive session on Tuesday, April 7th, 2015 at 1 p.m. in the East Conference Room, 12th floor of the City Hall, Phoenix City Hall, 200 West Washington Street, Phoenix, Arizona.
We have a motion. Do we have a second? We all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes unanimously. Mr. City Manager, do you have any budget reports or budget updates? All right, obviously, we're going to have a very substantive budget discussion in just a few moments. So now we'll move on to the formal items on the agenda. The first item is item number 2. because of a typo, all the items are labeled item number 2, but we'll go in order, and I think people will be able to figure it out. The real number 2 is the recommendations from our Equal Pay Committee. And so before I hand it over to our professional staff and members of the committee to talk about what was in the recommendations, the leader on that committee was Councilwoman Kate Gallego, so I'll ask her to see if she has a few words to kick it off before handing it over to our professional staff and committee members. Councilwoman.
Thank you so much. Happy Women's History Month. The month of March is Women's History Month, and we have made a lot of women's history in Arizona. 4 of our last 6 governors were women. We have 3 Fortune 500 CFOs. We made a little bit of women's history with our female fire chief recently, and more to come in Phoenix. And I think if we're going to be continuing to make history for women, we need to make sure all of our families have a great head start and opportunities. And part of that is making sure that families that are headed by women have the fair compensation that they need to do. So last year on Equal Pay Day, thank you, Mayor, you challenged me to look at this issue, and with the help of many of the people in this room, we have some recommendations to bring forward today that are just the beginning, but I think very exciting. We learned a lot about what's happening and what needs to move forward, and I want to thank Deanna for her leadership on the staff side, as well as Jody Liggett from the Women's Commission, Brendan Mahoney, and the members of the task force, including groups like AAUW, the Association of University Women, and the YWCA, who were there with us, helping the data, helping us understand what we've done already and what has happened on the national level. So this is just the beginning of addressing these issues, but a very exciting time. And we have some recommendations that even go on beyond issues of equal pay, but just advancing women at the City of Phoenix, including recruiting into non-traditional jobs. And hopefully today we can take that even a step further and set some goals for moving forward in that area, because that is one where we do not have as many women in our workforce. So not an issue of equal pay, but on average, we have a lot of great men serving us, and let's work forward to diversify this. So I will say a little bit more at the end, but I want to thank the many members of the community who stepped forward and helped us with this effort. Thank you.
Thank you for your leadership, Council. I know you're going to say a few words later on, but Mr. City Manager, I'll hand over to you, and you can introduce our great Deputy City Manager. She can introduce the team for hear the recommendations from our Equal Pay Committee. Mr. City Manager.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the Council. We have a great team here led by Deanna Jonovich, our Deputy City Manager, who's brought leadership from the Manager's Office to this. Also from the City Attorney's Office, Heidi Gilbert, our Acting HR Director, Cindy Bezery. You know Jody Liggett, our Women's Commission Chair, and Brendan Mahoney, the Human Relations Commission Chair. So with that, I'll turn it over to Deanna to walk you through these recommendations that they've spent a lot of time on.
Thank you, Mayor and members of the Council. We're happy to be here today to provide to you recommendations of the Equal Pay Work Group. Lilly Ledbetter is the face of equal pay. Her equal pay case really raised the profile on this issue throughout the nation and led to the Lilly Ledbetter Fair Pay Act. With the pay gap between men and women, while it's smaller in Arizona than many other states, women in the state earn on average 82 cents for every dollar that a man does. This is compared with 77 cents on the dollar nationally. We also know that there are areas such as communities with larger minority populations where the disparity can be even greater. For example, according to the Census Bureau Community Survey, Hispanic women earn 53% and African American women earn 64% of what their male counterpart earns. So as Councilwoman Gallego said, on April 8th, Equal Pay Day of last year, Mayor Stanton requested that Councilwoman Gallego form a work group to evaluate the city's current policies and provide recommendations to the mayor and council. Pay equity is an issue in communities across the country. The City of Phoenix is a major employer in this community and is part of the leadership fabric in the Valley. So we really believe that it's appropriate and timely as we work on this very important issue to invite the rest of the community to do likewise. Partners that are really working together simultaneously can make more of an impact than those working alone. So the City of Phoenix wants to continue to be a national leader and progressive by strengthening our non-discrimination policy. We had many people equal pay stakeholders that came to the table with us to discuss and provide recommendations regarding the pay disparity. As Councilwoman Geigo said, we have many of those in the audience with us today. I did want to acknowledge a couple of the members that were actually part of the work group. We have with us today Dana Campbell-Saylor, who is with Arizona Lead for Take the Lead. We also have Regina Edwards with the YWCA, as well as Jane Adrian with the AAUW, and Jean Johnson with the Equal Pay Coordinator for AAUW. If I could at this moment, I would just ask all of those in the audience that were at the table with us if they could just stand to be acknowledged.
Please stand. Thank you for your service.
So as a result of several months of work and presentation from both internal city departments and external stakeholders, we have the following recommendations that were developed by the Equal Pay Work Group. The first is proposed changes to our Human Relations Ordinance. The second being the Women's Commission charged with developing education and training. And finally, enhancing our own internal recruiting and hiring practices for non-traditional jobs within the city of Phoenix. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Heidi Gilbert to talk about the proposed changes to the ordinance.
Good afternoon, Mayor and members of Council. The proposed changes are intended to do two things. It's to highlight the importance of this issue and equal pay in the workplace, but it's also supposed to clarify the responsibilities for employers with respect to the city's ordinance. And in order to do that, the first place we started with, we needed to define compensation. Compensation is not limited to one's hourly rate of pay or to their salary. It is all the employment-related benefits and the perks that go along with that particular job. It's bonuses, it's stock options, it's time off, it's allowances, expense accounts, things like that. It was also important to add specific language, and this is consistent with the Equal Pay Act, to really highlight the fact that equal pay for men and women, similar jobs, same responsibility, is required. But if you do that, you also have to make it clear that if an employer has a system, whether it be a seniority system or a merit system, any system that they're basing their compensation on that does not differentiate based on sex, that's still acceptable. Those are the defenses that are contained in the Equal Pay Act, and we're recommending that they be incorporated here. The other thing that's important to do is to emphasize that retaliation is prohibited. If somebody brings forward a complaint, the way that you remedy that complaint is not to lower everybody's pay, it's to bring people up. The other thing that's a consideration is oftentimes employers are upset when employees are discussing their compensation. It's important to clarify that retaliation for sharing that kind of information is also prohibited. Whenever we make changes like that, there are requirements in our city contracts, our equal opportunity language. So if we make changes in one place of the ordinance, we have to carry it all the way through the ordinance. And in terms of our contracts, we currently, as a city, we contract over $600 million worth of goods and services. And so we want to make sure that that language is included going forward. So to do that, it's not just amending the ordinance, it's amending the standard terms and conditions of city contracts.
The second area, as I spoke of, the work group also saw value and importance in providing training and education. We have a unique opportunity to partner with our City of Phoenix Women's Commission, who has agreed to take on that challenge and work with some of our strong community partners such as AAUW, YWCA, and AWE to collaborate with them in the development of the educational component and also identify private funding to implement that training piece to employees as well as contractors that we work with. The last area is our enhancing our recruitment efforts. The group did see value in analyzing female employees within the city of Phoenix to ensure that there wasn't a lower average compensation issue. And again, the city's workforce is governed by a step pay plan based on seniority, which, as Ms. Gilbert indicated, is acceptable by the EEOC. So while we did analyze that, what we did, however, see was a potential underrepresentation of women in positions with greater compensation. We have approximately 11,000 full-time employees in the city. There's about 4,000 sworn police and fire, and of that we have just over 400 women. That in the police, for example, we have just under 5% of sworn fire employees that are women and just under 13% of sworn police in the workforce that are women. So I will turn it over to Ms. Bezery to talk about what we're going to do to enhance our efforts.
Good afternoon, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. As you can see, and while we know that the City of Phoenix really does emulate the national trend for employing women in the workplace, we have decided as a city that's not acceptable. As recommended in the Equal Pay Work Group, we're taking it further and acknowledging there is more that we can do to recruit greater numbers of women in non-traditional jobs. Our police and fire departments have already gone on record committed to focusing on additional community outreach and recruiting through their new hire efforts. We will support them in that through greater marketing messages and community outreach that we are doing on their behalf. In partnership with the Phoenix Workforce Connection, we will use their citywide resources to access job seekers and youth in our community to begin discussions on potential training programs they can participate in to pursue these non-traditional occupations. Public Works is already engaging in activities to attract women to their non-traditional jobs, like solid waste equipment operators. These positions offer solid careers with the city and opportunities to advance up the ranks. The Water Department is also joining hands with Human Resources and the Workforce Connection to identify occupations and potential training programs to encourage women to consider various service and technical positions that offer career opportunity and advancement as well. As we achieve success in these areas, we will expand our efforts. What we can tell you is that by changing the way we recruit, we will change our workforce.
So, Mayor and members of the council, as a result, again, of the work, the Equal Pay Work Group is recommending City Council approval of the proposed Human Relations Ordinance changes as described by Heidi Gilbert and also in your packet as Attachment A. We're also requesting approval of the Phoenix Women's Commission develop education and training materials, as well as updating our standard terms and conditions to align with the proposed ordinance changes, and finally, enhancing our recruitment and hiring practices for non-traditional jobs. We did take these recommendations to some of our community partners, such as AAUW, AWE, YWCA, as well as the Women's Commission, the Human Relations Commission endorsed them as well. And with that, I'd like to ask our two commission chairpeople to say a few words.
To you.
Thank you so much. My name is Jody Liggett. I'm chair of your Phoenix Women's Commission, and thank you so much for this opportunity to address you regarding equal pay in the city of Phoenix. I'm so proud of our community. We really take on the tough issues: veteran homelessness, discrimination, domestic violence. We've accomplished so much in our community. And I want to thank especially Mayor Stanton and Councilwoman Gallego for spearheading this important initiative, which addresses equal pay. And thanks to the members of the work group, including especially the AAUW and others who lent their time and expertise. As a member of AAUW myself, I'm especially proud of their contribution and proud to say that they support this ordinance. They've also supplied some really detailed information on the pay gap, which we will make available to each one of you and the audience. And thank you especially to my members of the Phoenix Women's Commission, which will be an important part of this effort going forward. One, to lift up the great work that's gone on thus far to support this initiative, and also to work on training, curriculum, and other efforts that will surround the ordinance and really make it much more powerful and meaningful for Phoenix City employees and others as well. So addressing the pay gap is so important. Why? Really 3 reasons. Number 1, it's real. Number 2, it affects more than just women. And number 3, there's a lot we can do about it. So the pay gap is real. Nationally, according to AAUW data, and you've heard some of this, generally women earn 77 cents on the dollar compared to men. Latinas much less at 53 cents, and African Americans less also at 64. In Arizona, we're doing a little bit better than that. We've got like 82 to 84 cents on the dollar. But it's not good enough, of course, and we want to go from good to great here, especially in the city of Phoenix. Now, you'll hear a lot of dickering about the pay gap and whether it really exists, and is it because women make different choices during their career, and is that really what the pay gap is about? Short answer, not really. Even when we control for personal choices, education, college major, age, sector, occupational sector geography, 1 year out of college, there's still a 7-cent gap. So we can argue about whether it's 20, 30 cents, 10 cents. There's a gap, and if there's a gap at all, we need to address it. This affects all of us. Women are primary or sole breadwinners in 41% of households with children. So when women aren't doing well, children and families are not doing well in our city. Working mothers are paid on average $10,000 less a year than men. What does that mean in real terms? That's 86 weeks of food or 1 year of rent for a family of 3. Really important to struggling families. And we know in Arizona, women and children are more likely to be poor. Over 50% of our births here are paid for by access. That's a level of poverty that we're dealing with for women and children. So getting women every cent that they are entitled to benefits all of us. Which brings me to the final point. There's a lot we can do about this. What can government do? You're going to do this here today. You can level the playing field. You can make sure that everyone is treated fairly under the law. That's what government is for. What the Women's Commission can do is support that work and make sure, for instance, that we're coaching and giving women very specific tools on how to negotiate salary. Less of an issue for city employees, but still there's a lot of strategies and techniques that women can pick up along the way, and we can support that work. We also want to lift up and support the efforts to recruit women to non-traditional careers and make sure Phoenix is doing everything they can to get women into those higher paid fields. And also with our partners in the nonprofit sector, we can raise awareness across the valley about what an important issue this is. So again, thank you very much for your efforts, and we look forward to being your partner.
Thank you very much. Mr. Mahoney.
Thank you very much, Mayor and members of the council. I will not repeat everything that Jody just said, but only to say that the Human Relations Commission...
Good stuff.
Yeah, it was great. Totally concurs. There's no disagreement at all. I note that the Commission unanimously supports the recommendations and wanted to make clear that they felt that it was good not only for the people of Phoenix, but for businesses in Phoenix. We've seen in the last couple of years the huge benefits that the city has derived from passing the non-discrimination ordinance, and the Human Relations Commission believes that the same benefits will happen with the equal pay ordinance. Other cities in the Maricopa County and the Valley are now looking to adopt a non-discrimination ordinance like the one Phoenix passed a few years ago, and we look forward to the city leading the way on this issue and other cities following Phoenix, which will be the leader in this. So it's, to use an overused phrase, it's a win-win. It's good for people and it's good for business. So we encourage your support. Thank you very much.
And with that, Mayor, I would ask Chief Yonner and Chief Kalkbrenner to join us at the table, and we're happy to answer any questions you might have.
All right, our two chiefs are here because, first off, thank you for being here and taking time on this very important subject matter. Issues have come up about what are we, now that, especially on the police side, now that we're going through a hiring cycle, how are we going to ensure that we reach out to the diversity that is Phoenix, including especially getting as many women police officers as possible. So I know those questions are going to come up. And so I don't know, Chief, if you want to have a couple words on that issue, that let people know we're hiring, that we're looking for as many talented people to apply for those jobs as possible.
Sure, absolutely, Mayor, Mayor and members of the council. Thank you for that. Yes, we're looking for the best candidates throughout our community, and we have a recruitment team. You saw the picture, a very diverse recruitment team that'll be in place next Wednesday after the holiday, and we are going to be at all events, and we're going to do our very best to attract all candidates, including women. So thank you.
All right. Chief, I don't want to talk about the fire side, about what we can do as council, what the community can be doing to ensure that as we hire more firefighters, that we have the diversity that is Phoenix, again, especially women, additional adding women to our fire service.
Thank you, Mayor and members of council. Similar to what the police department's doing is we're kicking off a recruitment team. Actually starting tomorrow will be our initial meeting, and we'll be out in the community using social media, attending community events. The interesting about female firefighters getting on the job, it's usually word of mouth or a personal contact. And Councilwoman Gallego and I've had this conversation is you speak to most firefighters and you say, why did you get interested? It's a word of mouth. Councilman Valenzuela being in the fire service can attest to that. So Mayor and members of council, if you run into athletic women that are looking to serve their community and be part of their community and make a difference in the lives of other people, I would highly recommend them looking on our website and becoming a Phoenix firefighter, pursuing it.
Thank you very much, Chief, and other questions may come up. I have a lot of cards here from the audience, but I actually have a question for Ms. Liggett. I know you talked about training, and probably what comes to mind mostly is training for employers, but you also talked about training for employees on negotiating skill and how important that is relative to help lessening this gap.
Absolutely. And I want to preface those comments by saying, by no means do we blame women, for wage inequality. But the fact is, in our society, this has happened, and we can give individual women tools that they need to negotiate fair salaries and strategies on, how do you find out what is the average pay for your field, what's a competitive wage, and negotiating skills. Very specifically, it's not enough to just say you should negotiate like a man. When that communication comes from a woman, it's received differently, we know, by men and women. So really, really targeted training, very, very specific help on how to be successful. I would be very remiss if I didn't mention, in celebration of all of this, many community members and the city are bringing Lily Ledbetter to town, our fair wage hero, April 14th. She'll be here in the morning and in the afternoon for a lunch, and then we'll have our first training session that evening around 5:30.
Thank you very much for that announcement. So, and then in addition, the Women's Commission has taken on the role and responsibility of organizing the community to go out and train employers.
Absolutely.
Not just city contractors, but organizations that want to improve themselves and learn the best cutting-edge practices on these important issues.
We think employers will welcome this opportunity to really help their employees develop professionally. That's really what this is about. And there are national tested curricula in this area. We don't need to reinvent the wheel. AAUW and YWCA in particular have a lot of national expertise that they're bringing to bear on this.
Thank you very much. We have a series of cards for testimony on this item. The first speaker will be our friend, Mayor Sarah Pressler. And then followed by Sheila Ojia, I hope I pronounced that correctly, followed by Catherine Baumgartner. Mayor.
Thank you, members of the council, Mayor. Those in the audience, my name is Sarah Pressler, and I served as the first woman to be elected mayor of Flagstaff. I served for 2 terms in Flagstaff, and most people thought I was the mayor's secretary. They didn't realize I was the mayor. I would go to events, and they would say, when is he coming? And I would say, I'm not sure. When do you think he's going to be here? And then they'd call my name, and I'd go up and offer remarks. And at 28 years old and the first woman, we sure had a good time. Councilmember Gates, I'm sure you can appreciate that being a sort of the next generation of those representing our communities. Well, I serve currently as the CEO of Arizona Foundation for Women, and we create a better life for Arizona's women and children. Investing in safety, health, and economics, we raise this issue with you today in support of the ordinance in particular because we believe that we want this to be a signal to our business community. And whether you agree with the particulars, for example, Councilman DeCiccio, or not, we would encourage you to think about this as an appropriate signal and indicator that we are open for business in Phoenix and that we welcome business in Arizona, and that this is not just a business signal, but it's a business strategy. If we look at the top companies that are recruiting and hiring, they have strong cases for women in their workforce and in leadership. And being here with 3 generations of Presslers, my mother, who serves as the chair of AAUW Phoenix, my niece, who won the top spot for any child in Arizona's history for the Voice of Democracy Veterans Contest for Arizona, and myself here, I can say that you're not just doing this today for yourself, but you're doing it for your daughters and for your mothers. And so I just wanted to emphasize to you in closing that the Arizona Foundation for Women really wants men to be successful and to reach their greatest potential. It's disheartening that men in Arizona are earning less wages than men nationally based on industry and area. We want men to be greatly successful, and we also want women who are highly competent and qualified to earn equal pay for equal work. So thank you for your time today, and thanks for having us.
Oh, Mayor, I've got a question of her as well.
Councilman, please.
You had mentioned my name on that, though, too. I mean, did you not think I was supportive of this?
I didn't get the indication that you might
I'm
you
very
might be.
supportive of the proposal. You'll see it on the vote. But that's been the problem that you and I have had before. You always assume something that's just not true. Now, where I'm going at on this, so just so that you know as well, is that I believe that the city of Phoenix needs to lead by example. It needs to show that it is the leader in that. Now, we've got 4 or 5 specific areas that need work here at the city of Phoenix. That's where I've been focused on. And I've also been focused on, had this conversation with Councilman Gates and I believe Councilwoman Gallego, that we need to have specific goals here in place in those non-traditional jobs. So that needs to happen. Plus, we also need to do a self-evaluation more than what we did this weekend of being able to see where we really are as a city. It's, you know, the thing that you've seen, the pushback from me is that I always believe that government needs to do it to themselves first and be the example, set the example first before looking at imposing it on anyone else. And you can't do that if you've got some non-traditional jobs at 4.7%, and you can't do that. So you've got to be able to boost that up, and you have to have specific goals of how you're going to do it. Not just the mechanism of getting it in place to say, hey, we're going to do these 5 or 6 things, but what is it, our end goal? And you've got to have end goals, otherwise you accomplish nothing. That's where it's been.
I'm sorry.
Mayor, do you want to respond, please?
Mayor, Councilman DeCiccio, I appreciate your clarification on that, and I know that you are a strong and clear advocate for good business, and the business case for diversity does support equal pay for equal work. You know, in particular, my father's generation, they looked at boards of directors and saw a group of white men and went, we're winning. And in my generation, we look around and we see a group of all white men on a board of directors and go, is that a company that I want to work for and with? And so how do we attract that top talent? We start with ourselves, right? We start with ourselves. And then we also serve as a signal to the business community that Phoenix is open for business. The top companies that Arizona Foundation for Women works with, American Express, Southwest Airlines, National Bank of Arizona, and others, have policies in particular that focus on emphasizing equal pay for equal work.
Just so you know, too, it made me really evaluate where we are in my own family, because there is a definite pay disparity in our family. My wife makes probably 4 or 5 times more than I do, and I'm going to have a conversation today and figure out how to make a little more money. But she also sets a really good example for our 2 daughters, with our 2 children, because they now see, and they literally pick up the business acumen of your parent, and you know, the moms are the moms. They're still in charge of the home. Regardless of what men think, they are in charge. And I think it's a good thing that way. But they use them as Laura says, thank you. But it's true. You and I have had this conversation. I just know certain things that I'm not in charge of.
Right.
When I'm told to do certain things, I have to do it. And
you're a good dad.
That way. Well, I think I'm a good dad. I think I'm a good husband too. But
yeah,
at the end of the day, it really comes down to the examples the parents lead to. So, and I think my wife's led a really good example for our 2 daughters.
I think that you and your wife are tremendous examples for your 2 daughters. In particular, the community looks to you for good examples of parenting. And I say that honestly. In particular, I do a lot of volunteer work with the Asian Pacific Community in Action and so many young families. And I can say to you that nothing would speak more volumes than a unanimous decision from this council today to say that we are signaling that we are moving, that Phoenix is open for business. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Mayor. Next speaker is Sheila Ojia, hope I pronounced that correctly, followed by Catherine Baumgarter, followed by Regina Edwards.
Hi, it's Sheila Ojia. And that's okay. I am the newly elected Arizona National Organization for Women Policy spokesperson.
Excellent.
And as a mother and of 2 daughters, and my mother was a single parent of 6 children. I am here to speak in favor of passing the fair pay. And thank you.
Thank you very much for your leadership and taking the time to come down. Ms. Catherine Baumgartner is next, followed by Regina Edwards, followed by Dana Campbell-Saylor.
Good afternoon. Thank you for being your work is amazing and very inspiring. Thank you. Hello. My name is Catherine Baumgartner. I'm a special education teacher here locally in a public high school, and my board member might be present at this meeting. I am very proud to serve our community, and I am also in a government position in a structured schedule for salaries. I am paid based on my years of service. I'm also paid on how much education I have. I have 2 master's degrees. I also have a certificate of attendance. So that affords me a certain amount of money. My husband works for the same school district. He is a bus driver. So if something was to happen in our family, our choices would be quite clear on who would remain employed and who would take care of a family member. So these types of things aren't choices. Now, had the roles been reversed? Now, is that something that's a choice on gender? Is that a choice on salary? These are all things that are very important. These are values. These are quality of life decisions. These are also choices in our family. These are very personal things. These are very important issues. And I'm also the Political Action Committee chair for our state in Arizona for the women's, there's my peeps. So we do think that this is a very complex, a very complicated, and a very personal issue. And we do appreciate your willingness to take time to consider all of the elements involved. It does affect everybody. And government workers are on a paid salary schedule with steps, and that's part of how the oppression works. We don't have any answers, and it is a very worthy. Did I do
Please
something
finish.
wrong?
No, go ahead. Yeah, we generally have about 2 minutes, but please finish.
Thanks. It's a very worthy effort to figure out how to make it a little more equitable for everybody. We all deserve the dignity.
Thank you for coming down. Thank you for your testimony. Thank you for your service as a special ed instructor. And please tell your husband thank you for his leadership as a bus driver. That's a critically important role in our education system. Ms. Edwards is next, followed by Dana Campbell-Saylor, followed by Barb Pressler.
Good afternoon, Mayor Stanton, council members, and city staff. Thank you so much for the opportunity to speak today. I'm Regina Edwards. As you said, I'm the CEO of the Arizona YWCA Metropolitan Phoenix. The YWCA's mission is to empower women and eliminate discrimination. So this is a perfect opportunity for us to talk about something near and dear to our heart and our mission. Nonprofits like the YW make a significant impact in our community, not just by providing programs, but by providing advocacy. Here in Phoenix, we've been providing advocacy for the last 103 years. Today, the YWCA is here strongly supporting this proposed amendment to include specific language related to equal pay. Because of the wage gap, as you've heard today, oftentimes women and their families teeter on the edge of poverty and unfortunately slide into poverty. The work that you're doing today and considering today can help to change that. We've all heard the facts about the dollar differences. Women typically earn about 90% of what men earn right out of college. After that, the median earnings for women are typically, depending state by state, as you've heard, 75 to 80%. Families who are dependent upon a woman's salary are most affected. So that makes this not just a women's issue, not just a Phoenix issue, but a community, a state, and a national issue. Policy changes, such as the ones you're considering today, are an important piece of the solution. In addition, educational programs, such as the YWCA and AAUW provide, are another part of the solution. The focus with AAUW, which I'm sure you'll hear more about from other speakers, is on how to negotiate to be paid what you're worth. Your salary is more than just the hourly rate. It's all those other areas of compensation, and that's what the classes and the educational program talk about. The program focuses on skills and knowledge and what women need to be able to find equal pay for equal work. So it's education, it's public policy, it's employer support, and it's strong action. We all know that there's not just one solution. Instead, it's individuals like us, the city, public policy, employers, and the whole community working together. This amendment is certainly a step in the right direction, and again, the YWCA strongly supports your efforts. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thanks for your leadership and taking the time to come testify. Dana Campbell-Saylor is next, followed by Barb Pressler, followed by Ms. Barker. Was this the one you want to testify on? So you'll be third then, okay? Ms. Saylor, good to see you.
Okay, thank you. Good to see you. Mayor Stanton, council members, thank you so much for this opportunity to speak. I'm Dana Campbell-Saylor, a member of Councilwoman Kate Gallegos' task force and the Arizona leader of Take the Lead, a previous member of the Phoenix Women's Commission. I'd like us to flash back about 40 years ago. I think a lot of you were still at recess probably then. I'm a young intern in a psychology department in an educational system. The job of the department head opens up, and 2 internal candidates apply for the job. One is a woman with a PhD and several years of experience, and the second, a man who has master's but less experience. The man was selected as head of the department. When I asked why, first I was told it wasn't my decision and it wasn't my business. The second was it was just better to have a man in the department head. I learned early on that gender was a major player. This was not an uncommon experience for a woman of my generation. Now, if we could flash to the here and now, the pay gap grows with age and gender regardless of education. Women, as you've heard, earn approximately 88% of what men are paid until they hit the age of 35. After that, median earnings for women are typically 75 to 80% of what men are paid nationally. As Jody said, it's worse for women of color. We have research, we've got data from everywhere, Harvard, Stanford, etc. However, to bring it home to Arizona, we have 306,000 family households in Arizona that are headed by single women. We can't wait for trickle-down change. Equal pay is good for women, it's good for business, and good for the economy. Arizona sister organizations, like you've heard, AAUW, Take the Lead, YWCA are being proactive and teaching financial literacy and wage negotiations to women in Arizona. We ask the city to join us. Let's change the media soundbite from arguing about the numbers and the percentages of the wage gap and how long it will take us to achieve parity. Let's highlight instead our city's successful businesses and spotlight companies which practice salary transparency. Let's showcase companies which remove the name from the resume to avoid gender bias. It's now time to award and recognize positive outcomes, value and ROI in terms of dollars and cents when there's equal pay for equal work. Let's have our wonderful city of Phoenix shine and adopt our equal pay recommendations. And I thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for your testimony and your leadership. Ms. Barb Pressler, good to see you. Followed by Diane Barker, followed by Tanya Norwood.
Good to see you too, Mayor and Council. Thank you for allowing me to be here. It's great to see your faces again. I had an experience when my husband passed on. I was left 15 years ago with one of my 3 children out of the house, and I also had a teenage boy who needed his dad, and a college student who is here today. And so at times, I went back to school and earned a doctorate degree. I already had a master's degree. I was an educator, had been a principal, and before that a teacher. And it was tough. I had 3 jobs at one time to put food on the table, buy a house, pay the rent, and so forth. It was not easy. And it didn't have much to do with anything except that I had to work hard, and sometimes it was very tiring. But that's in the past. But I am here for the present, and I have brought my family, and I am so grateful. I'm in District 8, and I'm so grateful that this issue has come up. And I'm also president of AAUW Phoenix, a 90-strong women's group who has been in existence since Arizona. It's that old. I hope you'll excuse my dress. I'm on the way to a baseball game. But I am so in favor of this, and I have served with Brendan over there in the Human Relations Commission. Love that work. We're doing some great things, and I thank you for taking this up, and I'm heartily in favor of it.
Thank you very much for your taking time to be here, your leadership, and your testimony. Ms. Barker is next, followed by Ms. Norwood, followed by Joanne Holland.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Mayor and Council. Diane Barker in District 7, and I'm supporting the equal pay. I've had an opportunity, and I want to say, it's nice to follow so many lucid, well-informed women. I want to give you a kudo, too, for the AAUW. You've helped me and some of my friends recently. You have computers. You have knowledgeable counselors, and you also have a friend of mine just wrote me, I want you to help me start a business. I says, well, have you been over to AAUW and the Phoenix Hive, which is Burton Bar? So we have these access. What I wanted to share with you, I have worked, my career in private. I was a real estate agent for quite a long time. Tough way to make a living. You don't get paid until you bring people together. And I've worked for government in different positions, particularly with contractors, and it's all people business. You're dealing with people. You need to know how to motivate and to make that final sale or that positive outcome. And in dealing with people, I've noticed that, whatever sex it is that there's certain jobs that we have a way of thinking that is for a woman and a man. And it's been traditional, but this is a changing workforce. We need to give, women their due to be the bosses where they can, and the men to be boss or be a secretary. I have been in front of, and the person that is the receptionist lots of times runs the whole show because they will know whether they're going to let you through to the decision maker or not. And I've seen men get a problem solved, that sat in that position and get a problem solved. No, it wasn't the 20-year-old gal with pumps and perfect hair and like that. But this guy got us home. So what we need to do in raising women, because women have been classified as secretaries, which is a lower income, it all needs to be opened up. People need to do the best job and be paid well for it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Barker. Ms. Norwood is next, followed by Joanne Holland, followed by Marshall Pimentel.
Mr. Mayor, Board. My name is Tanya Norwood. I am the president of the Phoenix Metropolitan. In the mouth. Thank you. My name is Tanya Norwood. I'm the president of the Phoenix Metropolitan chapter of the National Organization for Women. I stand here before you, as well with my crew, saying we definitely 100% support what's going on here today. But I also say, if we do this, we must do this right. Mayor, we have always stood as a beacon of light to show others around us how to do what we're going to do, but do it the right way. I asked that those of you represented here pushing this issue forward, please do not forget to bring the ladies of color with you. I look at you, thank you. I look at you, and I know that there's one or two on your board, there's one or two here, but there are organizations, Latino organizations, African American organizations, Native American organization, Asian American women organization. When I picked up the phone to see if they were involved, they all said no. I want to express my concern that we're not all at the table, but my delight in the fact that we are moving forward as a collaborative. And so with that, I want to once again say that we are definitely for and we're supporting this initiative, and we like a little bit more representation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Norwood. Joanne Holland is next, followed by Marshall Pimentel, followed by Louis Schmidt.
Good afternoon, Mayor and City Council members. As a Latina, I'm very proud to stand before you. And as President and CEO of Central Phoenix Women, I'm here to support the ordinance and will be brief. And I would like to remind everyone that today, for the first time in our country's history, the largest group of Americans living in poverty are children. 1 in 5 children live in the most abject, dangerous, hopeless, backbreaking, gut-wrenching poverty any of us could imagine. And I believe in Arizona, that statistic may be higher. 1 in 5 and their children. 41% of these come from single-family homes, which are led by females. If fidelity to freedom and democracy is the code of our civic religion, then surely the code of our humanity is faithful service to that unwritten commandment that says, we shall give our children better than we ourselves receive. How do we begin to make this happen? It's to pay women equally to men. I know all of you believe this in this unwritten commandment, so I hope you will vote unanimously for this ordinance, as this is the time and the era of women, and we need to make this happen. And thank you, Councilman Kate Gallego, for making sure it does.
Thank you very much, Ms. Holland. I appreciate that. Is Marshall Pimentel here? Or Mr. Schmidt, you want to jump ahead of him or take his time?
I believe Marshall handed me his minutes, Mayor.
That is correct. Good to see you.
Thank you, Mayor and members of the City Council. And Mayor, I forgot your name. What was your name? Sarah Preston. Okay, yes. I experienced that myself, too, with my mother. My mother was, she adopted 6 kids. And, my father left her, a few years after they adopted us, and I experienced how it was, to grow up in a single household like that with a single parent, with having the parent be treated differently just because of their gender and their sex. And so I know how you feel. I've gone to car dealerships when I was younger. I went to a car dealership with my mother, and some car salesman told her, "Bring your husband when you're ready," And my mother is too strong of a woman to actually put up with that kind of stuff. So it's great to see that we have an ordinance, that's going to be, that you guys are going to vote on today that will actually highlight the need to have equal pay for equal work. I'm going to read a letter from President Lee Saunders. He's the president of AFSCME International, and this is a letter he wrote last year. As many of you may or may not know, April 8th is the day that we celebrate Equal Pay Day. And I'm just going to read his letter. So this is AFSCME President Lee Saunders issued the following statement, and this was last year of April 8th of 2014. Today acknowledging Equal Pay Day. That day marks the end of the extra period of time that women in the U.S. must work in order to earn what men earn during the previous year. Many people probably don't know why we celebrate Equal Pay Day. And this is, of course, not April 8th, but today marks the number of extra days women need to work and earn what men earned during the previous year. So U.S. women must work until April 8th this year to earn what men made as of December 31st last year. This is unacceptable. Our mothers, wives, daughters deserve equal pay for equal work. 50 years after Equal Pay Act of 1963 and 5 years after signing the Lilly Ledbetter Act, it is unconscionable that in 2014, equal pay is still up for debate as it is today in 2015. Equal pay is not just a woman's issue, it's a family issue. Women make up almost half of our workforce, and yet they are paid 77% of what men are paid. And the pay gap is worse for women of color. A majority of women in the workplace are mothers, and 1/3 are sole breadwinners for their families. Their incomes are critical to making ends meet. When women working in the full-time earn 23% less than men over a lifetime, their retirement security is jeopardized. The pay gap limits women's ability to contribute to her retirement income, including Social Security. When women receive equal pay for equal work, our families, communities are on a stronger economic footing. And I have to compliment the city of Phoenix because this is one area that we don't struggle in. I've seen that the city's making positive strides, whether it's in public safety or in the general civilian employees. The city does lead by example, Councilman DeCiccio. And I'm the president for Local 2384, and we represent the blue-collar employees of the city of Phoenix. And maybe 20, 30 years ago, you wouldn't see electricians as women, but now we do see women electricians. We have Stella Reese, who maintains the HVAC system for the court system. Again, we are seeing traditional changes. We have women even in fleet, even though Councilman DeCiccio wants to outsource the fleet, we have women who rely on that income because they are, there are the amount of women doing non-traditional work that women predominantly did or have done, that is changing. So I'm glad to see that this is an issue that's going to be voted on today. And this should be one of the only issues that the council should vote unanimously. We shouldn't have any type of party lines being drawn here. This is about your wives, your daughters, cousins, sisters, anything. And Councilman DeCiccio, your daughters may not realize this vote today, but later on in life, they will thank you for this vote that you guys will take on today. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you very much, Louis Schmidt. Alona Del Rosario is the next speaker. And that's the last card I have to speak on this item. So if you want, I have a couple cards in favor, but not wishing to speak. If you do wish to speak, please fill out a yellow card, and we'll make sure you get you in before the vote of the City Council. Good to see you.
Good afternoon, Mr. Mayor and council members. My name is Alona, and I work for the Arizona Coalition to End Sexual and Domestic Violence here in Midtown Phoenix. For survivors of domestic violence, personal safety is closely linked to economic stability. In fact, instability, or the ability to support themselves and their children, is one of the top reasons that victims and survivors of domestic violence remain in or return to an abusive relationship. This pay gap over the lifetime also means that women have smaller Social Security checks and lower savings, which seriously hinders their long-term financial security. Mr. Mayor and council members, supporting and enhancing women's financial security will help make Phoenix communities safer, as domestic violence survivors and victims need financial stability to leave these abusive relationships. And we already know that the City of Phoenix has truly been a leader on the national scale, introducing Paint Phoenix Purple, which we still have a few more years of that campaign going, and that's something that I think we're all really proud of. And so I think this is one more way that the City of Phoenix can really help support victims and survivors of domestic violence. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. In favor, not wishing to speak, Diane Post, Connie Hugh, and Anita Irwin. Did anyone else wish to speak on this item? All right, with that, I'm going to hand it over to Councilman Gallego for a motion and see if we get a second, and then we'll take questions and comments from members of the council.
Thank you, Mayor. I move that we move forward with the Equal Pay Group recommendations, that we make proposed changes to the Human Relations Ordinance. We empower the Phoenix Women's Commission to develop education and training. We update the standard contract terms and conditions to align with proposed ordinance changes, that we enhance recruiting and hiring practices for non-traditional jobs, and that we set metrics and come back in 6 months and report on our progress towards doing so.
Second.
We have a motion. We have a second. I'll turn to members of the council. Have any questions? Heidi, I have a question for you. Last time we amended the Human Relations Ordinance, we put in protections, comprehensive protections for our LGBT residents in housing, employment, and non-discrimination. There was a lot of discussion about the criminal nature of our Human Relations Ordinance, and inevitably this is going to come up when assuming that we have the votes here today and we pass equal pay as part of our Human Relations Ordinance, that this is criminalizing businesses in Phoenix. Can you talk about that element of our Human Relations Ordinance and how it works as a practical matter?
Mayor, members of council, this is a good question. Currently, be advised that there's already protections in the ordinance for equal compensation, and the goal of these changes was to highlight the issues specific to the gender gap, and also to clarify employers what we mean. So yes, it currently is a criminal complaint. It is complaint driven, so somebody would have to come forward. And part of that process before we get to a criminal complaint is, of course, if the person can establish a prima facie case, and we're going down that path, we would try to work it out with the employer. There's a conciliation process built in, a mediation process, and the whole point of that would be to educate employers on what this really means and what is expected. If it got to the point where a criminal complaint was going to be filed, there is the potential for criminal charges, and part of the reasoning for that is that we can put the employer on probation so that we can monitor them to make sure that they are complying with the law. It is a Class 1 misdemeanor. The maximum fine would be $2,500 per count. There is the potential for jail time. We do not anticipate that somebody would be incarcerated. This is the purpose of the ordinance is, of course, education and compliance, and to make sure that employers are doing what they're supposed to be doing. But it is a criminal complaint right now, So that's not changing anything. That's the way the ordinance has been crafted and has been so for decades.
That's been the ordinance as it relates to claims of discrimination based on race, sex, religion, national origin, now LGBT status because of our comprehensive, and then this claim would potentially then be included on it based on not having equal compensation for equal work.
Mayor, members of council, the ordinance as written right now would allow somebody to bring a complaint like that, and whether or not it be based on sex, they could actually be, if we had people of color come forward and saying we're being paid less than our white counterparts, they can bring that claim right now. So in terms of the framework that's set up, we're not altering that in any way. This is just highlighting the fact and emphasizing that this is an important issue, and that it is, on top of that, it was specific to women. That is what it means, and they are people should be paid equally.
Yeah, and the real advancement on the ordinance side is that it clarifies that pay includes all forms of compensation, not just salary, that it has to be equal.
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
All right, excellent. Other questions? I know Councilman Ware, Councilman Ware, you have a question?
We talked about this, you and I talked about this earlier. This isn't increasing penalties in any way, is it?
Mayor, members of council, no, it does not.
It's not criminalizing anything that's not criminalized already. I think
Correct.
that was sort of the genesis of the mayor's questions.
Yes, it's keeping the same framework.
It's keeping everything the same. It's not instituting quotas or anything like that with the city or with contractors or anything else, correct?
Councilman, it does not do that.
So the way I read it, it's a 5-point item here on page 2 and 3. So items 1, 2, and 4, I believe, based on our conversation and my understanding, you take the federal statute that's already there, you're taking that language and putting it into our less clear, already existing ordinance. Is that right? I mean, I'm using layman's terms, so I know you're a lawyer, so you clean it up for me if you would. Or say I'm wrong if it's my interpretation is wrong, which is certainly possible.
Councilman, I'm going to make sure I know which ones 1, 2, and 4 are.
Sure.
In terms of the definitions, yes, we are adding a definition of compensation so that it's clear.
I'm looking at the green.
What
Do
is
you have the same
what
thing?
is meant. Proposal number 2 is to amend the specific provisions of the ordinance, so to include not just in the definition section, but the prohibited acts, the declarations of policy, and the required contract language that the city already has for equal employment opportunities. And then number 4 is just a byproduct of that. So as I indicated earlier, when you amend the section of the ordinance that is required contract language, we need to make sure that that is incorporated into the standard terms of city contracts. So when we're sending out an RFP or an RFQ, that language is in there, and that would also include the definition of compensation.
So really, we're just clarifying for people who are already covered what's expected.
Councilman,
Then I'll get to the other 2 in a second, but then there's an education component to sort of explain that to them. Is that fair?
Councilman, that was exactly the purpose of this, is to amplify this issue and the importance of this issue, and this is what the ordinance requires, and to clarify the expectations for employers, and that so they understand what is required of them under the ordinance and under the Equal Pay Act.
And I think the mayor and I, a sidebar conversation, I might have an issue with this if this was criminalizing something that wasn't already criminalized, but it already is. I mean, there's nothing today saying we're going to decriminalize, or that's not an option. It's just clarifying language. Number 5 is enhance the recruiting practices for non-traditional jobs. My interpretation of that is we're going to try to get more females to apply, or, preferably for positions where right now they're underrepresented, which I think you told me were fire, police, streets. What was the 4th one, Cindy?
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, Councilmember Waring, fire, police, streets, transportation, and public works show the greatest underutilization.
And that's a pretty dramatic, mostly male population
Very
of workers.
traditional male.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, and then fire and police are higher paid.
Yes.
So that's where you get a lot of disparity, because you only have, 5% of firefighters and 13% of police officers. And I think you said the pools are somewhat close to that, right?
The pools are very small. We're lucky to get 10% in the pool, but that's the beginning before they go through assessment. Yeah, before they go through assessment. So our goal in the metrics that will be established will be how will we increase those pools, and what are our goals to increase those pools.
So, I mean, really, if I say we're trying to change the makeup of the pools, that's the goal of number 5, with the recruitment efforts that the chiefs talked about, getting out in the community and so forth. I mean, I'd say that's probably a pretty fair assessment of what number 5 does.
Yes, sir.
And number, I forgot my reading glasses, I'm sorry. Number 3, it talks about using private funding to get the message out. So you're not asking for city, we're not taking money out of the general fund that would be used to hire police officers or something this year. You're talking about setting up a to be determined educational component, and it looks like pay for it with community partnerships and private funding. So I don't see a general fund line item or anything listed here.
Mayor Stanton, Councilman Waring, members of the council, that's correct.
And then it says include optional training. So we're not mandating any training on anybody who's not receiving training now or doesn't want the training. It's optional. I assume if any of that changes in number 3 because it's vague, it will come back to us that we'd vote. If we're going to make it mandatory training, or you're going to ask for city money, general fund money, what have you, to do this, you'd have to come back to us for a vote subsequent to this, correct?
Mayor, Councilman Waring, members of the council, that's correct. We are not mandating training. We'll be partnering with the community to offer the training.
Yeah, see, and I'm voting for this. I mean, I think the goal is meritorious. I don't know that we're changing a whole lot, frankly, but I do understand some of the issues and why the city's numbers are skewed, given what you told me about the 4 job groupings, public works, streets, police, and fire being so heavily male-dominated, and then police and fire being, just much higher compensated than the average worker. So the numbers make sense. I understand why our numbers aren't stellar in this area. I like the optional component. Obviously, employers who may have been confused in the past by an unclear ordinance now have at least clarity. Whether they like it or not is a different story. We're not talking about that today, but it gives clarity to something that was unclear before, and they can opt in as far as learning more about it. And you're not trying to take money from other programs and move it into this. So, I mean, bottom line, we're not criminalizing anything. We're not really upping the penalties at all. We're trying to help people avoid pitfalls. When was the last big case we had in this area? Heidi talked about, people coming to us to make complaints, because they can also go to the EEOC and the Attorney General's office, correct?
Mayor, Councilman Waring, and other members of council, exactly. And so what we're doing is for employers that are already familiar with the Equal Pay Act, it's letting them know and understanding that that's what the city means too. And under our ordinance, I mean, it wasn't just limited to women in that particular gap. It was across the board for all of the protected categories. And this is just to highlight that particular issue.
It's not really adding a category, it's just highlighting it, bringing attention to a category that's been less utilized. Is that a way to put it?
Mayor and Councilman Waring and members of council.
Inartfully phrased, so I apologize.
Well, I can't say that it wasn't there. It's just I think you heard from the speakers today. It's the Equal Pay Act of 1963, and if this law has been on the books for 50 years, why is there still a gap? And so, as Ms. Bezery tried to point out to you, there's always more that we can do, and there's steps that we can take to continue to try to close that gap. But in terms of the business community and to the employers, so that they could understand, what we mean, the city means when we say that. One of the simplest ways to do that was incorporate the framework from the Equal Pay Act. And of course, all of the defenses.
When we want to be clear, we don't want to underemphasize. This eliminates any potential gray area or misunderstanding that there is no daylight between the city's ordinance and the federal ordinance. I think that's pretty significant, and that's the work that's been done here.
But employers would have to follow the federal guidelines now, correct?
Yes, sir.
So, I mean, assuming they know federal law, which I would imagine most astute employers would, they'd already know these definitions.
I think you would assume that, but I think we find that they don't. And
I guess I'd be,
as we are the government closest to the people, aligning our ordinance with that, I think
would be surprised if they were worried about not complying with our very vague city ordinance, and were completely blissfully unaware of the federal law that's been in effect since 1963. I think that's a supposition that I would probably reject.
I think if they are want to be a city contractor, after today, they're going to be paying more close attention to the city rules, and that's one of the great advantages of what we're doing here today, is that you want to do business with the city. If assuming this passes, it'll be absolutely clear what our legal requirements are, and that it's a criminal penalty if you violate it.
So what was the last big, what's the big case, most recent big case we've had where somebody's come and complained, and we've used our current policy ordinance to address it?
Mayor, Councilman Waring, members of council, in which capacity? In terms of equal pay?
Yeah, I mean, is there something that's come up recently, or?
No, this was recommendation and the work of the task force was at the mayor's direction and challenging Councilwoman Gallego and the group to come forward with what can we do to improve.
But people could have complained to your office before under the same...
Mayor, Councilman, and members of council, yes, they could. But there hasn't been an onslaught of people coming in with these kinds of claims. There's the potential they could also, you were talking about the EEOC earlier, they can bring a claim under Title VII as well. So that in terms of disparate treatment in the workplace.
They could go to other places. They could go to the Attorney General. They could go to the EEOC. I mean, you said onslaught. Have we had any claims?
Not that we could recall. That they're very few and far between, Councilman.
But today we're changing something where we've had no claims, even though this has been out there for a period of time. Okay. I'm good. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Other comments or questions by members of this council? Councilman Gate?
Thank you, Mayor. Just to follow up on the questioning, Ms. Gilbert, just one other thing is that we also have the affirmative defenses that are now will be added to this ordinance that we didn't have before.
Mayor, Councilman Gates, and the rest of the council members, the affirmative defenses are expressly set forth in the Equal Pay Act. Our ordinance, as currently written, just says it requires equal forms of compensation without really giving an explanation of what that means. So if the recommendation is to include the language from the Equal Pay Act that talks about, substantially similar, skills and responsibilities, it would follow and make sense that you bring forth the affirmative defenses set forth in the Equal Pay Act as well.
Okay, great. I think that makes a lot of sense, and I would kind of echo Councilman Waring's comments. First of all, thanks to everyone who is involved in this process, and all the recommendations are great. I think as someone with 2 daughters, I am very much encouraged by the example that you all set, and particularly, Mayor, I appreciated your comments. My wife, as some of you may know, is a rather young Superior Court judge, and so some of the things you talked about, I've heard her have those same sort of experiences in the elevator, so thank you for that. I think that, again, I would agree with what Councilman Waring said. This really is not the forum to have a discussion on the fact that we have criminal penalties in the ordinance. It is what it is, but I think we're going to come out of this with a stronger ordinance that I think does a better job of balancing the interests of the employee and the employer, so I appreciate that. And again, just want to thank everyone for their involvement. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you very much. Councilman Williams?
Thank you, Mayor. I have a question on the training. And I know you're talking about how to train to negotiate, but there are many women and young women who really do not have the confidence or the experience. They can maybe get in on entry level, but they don't know how to go the next step. So if you could include something that helps motivate them and teach them how to go up the ladder, I think that would be extremely important. And you probably already talked about this, Jody, but I didn't hear it, and I just wanted to affirm it.
Sure, Mayor, Councilwoman Williams. Yes, 2 of the curricula, just to give you an example by their names. One is Start Smart, so having confidence in that entry-level job negotiation, and then Work Smart throughout your career. And I know that the Women's Commission is very interested in, not necessarily taking curriculum off the shelf. Certainly we'll do that. We won't reinvent the wheel, but bringing in these other elements, I think mentoring is tremendously important, and opening up a sense of possibility for young women in their career so that they're really negotiating well and considering all their options.
I think that's extremely important. I've had experience the last couple of years of young women, even high school students, who said, oh, what? That's settled a long time ago. There's no discrimination. We get equal jobs. We have equal opportunities. And I just want to scream at them. And I keep saying the battle's not over. But I really think an opportunity for young people are the non-traditional jobs. Police and fire, that takes a spatial motivation, mission in your heart type of thing. But there are many other opportunities beyond that. And I would like to have you contacting and really involve some of the VOTEC schools, some of the high school, the Delta program, and some of those that talk about non-traditional jobs, because I think that is an area that you could probably interface with many young women. And don't forget the techie operations, because if you've read the paper lately, you know that they're on the bottom and they can't even see the ceiling, let alone break it. So I encourage you. I want to thank everybody. I want to thank Councilwoman Gallego for doing this, and the mayor. This is extremely important. Women's issues, near and dear to my heart, and we can't give up, and we have to not only continue to go forward, but we have to continue to educate the younger ones as we come along, because sometimes they take things for granted or believe things that aren't quite accurate, and they need a touch of your wisdom. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Councilwoman. Councilman DeZizio.
Thank you, Mayor. And I do want to thank you too, Mayor, and I want to thank Councilwoman Gallego for bringing this forward. I think it's important for us to do this, especially as a city, and half of our population are women, and if we don't accept it, we got a problem right off the bat. But I do want to thank you for bringing this forward. There are a couple things, and I'm going to keep it really short. I do want to thank the members of the committee that were real involved in this. You put a lot of time and effort into it. The idea now is to see the fruits of your efforts and seeing something get passed here, which I believe that will get passed. It looks like it's going to be unanimous. Congratulations. But I think it's going to come down to, we'll see the real difference, because what we can control is what we control is in our own home. That's the first place that we look at. And I think that the motion that Councilwoman Gallego put forward, I think, is a little bit more than what we were basically presented with. I think it's a good thing. I think we do need to look at metrics or goals or whatever we want to look at. I think it's important, especially in the non-traditional fields at the City of Phoenix. Could I ask also if we could get a report back every 6 months to see how we're doing in those non-traditional fields, to make sure it's one of those things, if you don't measure it, you're not going to follow through with it. And it's one of those things that if you can measure it and if you can look at it, that means it's in front of you at all times. So if we're okay with that, could we also have a report back every 6 months? Staff?
Mayor, members of the council, what I take from the motion from Councilwoman Gallego, seconded by Councilwoman Pastor, is that we should develop metrics that cover that. Recruitment, attraction, all those aspects, particularly for our non-traditional jobs for women, and that we would come back to the council with what those metrics are, and then we would definitely need to report to you regularly on those.
Okay.
And we'll have a group including Chief Kalkbrenner, Chief Yonner, the HR director, and we will pull those together.
Yeah, and if you just put in a time frame of when we can get those reports back, just like we do with the budget, I think it's important. It's always in front of us. And what it also does is it creates a challenge for those departments, to do a little better at what they're doing. I mean, and Chief Kalkbrenner, you've done a fantastic job so far, and you've inherited a department. But the department that you're in right now is only 4.7% women. It doesn't, I think you've got some big goals ahead of you, and big things to get done as well. Police, you're 12.8%. I think that's fantastic, but you need to do a lot better as well. And once you've got those in front of you at all times, I think you're able to push those things forward. And likewise with the equipment operators, engineering, other departments within the city, that's the best way to get it forward. Thanks, Mayor. Thanks for all the work that all of you have done up here, too.
Thank you very much. Councilman Nowakowski.
Mayor, first of all, I'd just like to thank Councilmember Gallegos for all her hard work and advocating for this ordinance. And thank you all that served on this committee. After 50 years, I think it was time for us to update it and educate us on this matter, because I think it's so important that we continue to talk and educate, and to bring to light that there's 4 departments in the city of Phoenix that we really need to work on. And I think that's something that I didn't know about, and that's something that you brought to light. So I know that as the chair of Public Safety Subcommittee, I'll be working with both of our chiefs to make sure that we address those issues. The other thing that was brought to light by one of the speakers is that how do we recruit and involve more of the minority women in our boards and commissions? Because I think that's something that's really important that we as a city of Phoenix need to look into also, is making sure it's not just on these types of boards, but on all boards and all commissions. And, you know, especially when minority women are experiencing the most significant pay gaps within the city, right? So I think that we need to really address that. So once again, I really want to thank you all for all your hard work and continue to advocate, because it's through this advocating and it's through education that we all learn and we can make these positive changes. So thank you once again.
Thank you very much. Any additional members? Councilwoman Pastor?
So I'd like to thank everybody for the commission and Councilwoman Gallego for moving this forward. It's been very interesting to hear this conversation to me, because it makes me go back and have a conversation with my 93-year-old grandmother and talking about, and my grandfathers, and sitting at the table and sitting there and then pushing education in order to get out of a cycle of poverty, and how education would change your life. And for me sitting here today, she's 93, and me going back and saying, well, guess what? Guess what I voted on? And for my generation, the fact that I'm voting on this should not be happening, but we have to keep continuing to push forward. And I'm just sitting here and my mind's just moving really fast. The other thing is that there was a point about not having to remove names from resumes. Well, it brings me to a story of the fact that my name is Laura Ann Pastor, due to the fact of ethnic bias. There was a conscientious thought to name me that way, because when my name would be on a resume, I would not be bounced out because it wasn't Laura Lopez Pastor. So I am like internally going crazy because we were having this conversation. And so I am glad to know that my colleagues here are going to support equal pay, especially my male colleagues, because it still exists when it shouldn't exist. Secondly, I believe if we go to the Tough Mudder run, we will find all the women that are participating, and I'm sure we can recruit there. And I'm sure there's other sports activities that we can get them. So I recommend that we have a recruitment booth at the Tough Mudder run, and I know of one person in this room that possibly could be a firefighter or police officer. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Councilwoman Pastor. Any additional comments? I'll just have one comment and hand over to Councilman Valenzuela. Please, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Vice Mayor. I too would like to thank everyone who was involved on this, and Mayor, this is about being proactive, and thank you for making the challenge to someone who clearly took on that challenge and shined in Councilwoman Kate Gallego. Thank you, Kate. Now, you know, this is a good thing, and it was mentioned that this is about moving this ordinance between, moving the city of Phoenix from good to great. And I think it does that, but we just have to remember that at the end of the day, there's fair and there's unfair. And this is about being fair. And that's all there is to it. This is about being fair. In 2013, the majority of the council voted for essentially it was an anti-discrimination ordinance to protect our LGBT and disabled communities. And many of the same people at the table worked on that. Brendan, you were one of the leaders on that. and here you are at the table once again. So thank you, all of you, for the commitment. But on that day, and you all remember, we were at the Orpheum. There was, I don't know, 500 or 600 people there. That was a really long meeting, and at the end of that vote, it was one of the proudest moments of my life as a Phoenician. That this is something that was long overdue, but this is something that that had to be done, and we got it done. And it was done in a proactive manner, and this is about being proactive. This is another step in that direction. You know, there hasn't been a case, it sounds like, in quite some time, but we shouldn't wait for that case. This is about being very proactive. It's about, you know, having something written in tomorrow morning's paper or tweeted immediately, you know, by every Phoenician, that this is what the city of Phoenix stands for. Our actions should always demonstrate to the people of Phoenix and to the country that when it comes to equality, when it comes to equal opportunity, when it comes to civil rights, human rights, when it comes to equal pay, you know, this train moves in one direction as far as the city of Phoenix is concerned. So I absolutely support it. I'm excited. It's another very proud moment in our history and for me personally, and I want to thank you all for working so hard. And again, you know, Mayor, I want to thank you for bringing it up, and even more importantly, I would say, Councilwoman Gallego, you really took this on and you shined, so thank you for doing this.
Excellent comments, Councilman. I'll just say a couple words and hand it over to Councilwoman Gallego to close out before the vote. And thank you for suggesting it wasn't really me who brought it up. It was Jody Liggett. When she worked, I was lucky enough to have her on my staff. So thank you very much. We hire great people, talented people. You get great results. And Brendan worked so hard and was really the brains and the effort behind the non-discrimination ordinance. So two very talented people that I was blessed to have in my office, and now are moving on and doing great things in this community. I too just want to say thank you. Every organization represented here, the Association of University Women, YWCA, Phoenix chapter of NOW, I'm leaving some out, but so many of these dynamic organizations. Thank you for being the strength behind what we're doing here today, keeping our city on the straight and narrow. Obviously, the leaders of our Women's Commission and our Human Relations Commission, you and all your commission members, because these commissions are now fully activated, and they're going to be take on some really tough issues and roll up their sleeves and get to work on these important issues. So I just want to say I'm very, very grateful for your ongoing passion and leadership on behalf of the citizens of Phoenix. The bottom line is this: when it comes to equal pay, everyone on this dais knows that we are in the talent business. We have to retain the best talent in our city. We have to attract the best talent. Equal pay, this ordinance and what it represents, and the education that's going to follow through after today, makes us a more competitive city. Passing this ordinance, which is not just a statement of values, but it puts it right in our human relation ordinance that this is the law here in the city of Phoenix. It's good for the women of the city. It's good for children. It's good for families. It's good for men of this city. It makes us more competitive economically, and this is a great thing for our city. So I wanted to leave my final thank you to Councilwoman Gallego. She was the right person asked to lead this effort, and if you haven't had a chance to work with Councilwoman Gallego, it's awesome. She rolls up her sleeves and gets things done, and that's exactly what happened here. So to get to this point where we have a solid ordinance that's going to advance the city is really due to your leadership. So thank you, Councilwoman Gallego. You have final comments, and we'll take our vote.
Wonderful, thank you. I really do believe that when women win, Phoenix wins, and that this is a step in that direction. So thank you to my colleagues for your support and kind words for the people who made this happen. As I've spoken with different businesses about it, it's been great to see the support we've got and to be able to highlight some of our success stories. Just a few blocks away, we have WebPT, which is one of our most quickly growing companies, and they've done some great programs. They have a Propel Her program where women come together and talk about these issues. WebPT is very open about their compensation, and so women can understand where am I in this, and what does my employer value if I want to go to the next level. And they also have mentoring programs, which are very helpful for if you have someone in management who's mentoring you, you can really understand how do I make that pitch, and what is the data out there? So we have companies that are already trying to do these things, and we can shine a spotlight on them and say thank you, because they make our business community stronger, they make our city stronger, they make women want to live here and really pursue their careers here. As I've shared this with different groups, one of the provisions that people really valued was the language we're adding on retaliation. I had a woman who works at one of our concessionaires who believed that she was ready for a raise and was a top performer, but was saying, this is my breadwinning, this is dinner for me. If I lose this job, I'm in trouble, and it just may not be worth it to ask for that raise. But what we're saying at the City of Phoenix is the City Council has your back, and the worst thing that could happen if you ask for a raise is that your employer says no. And that's something we can all feel really good about, that people can go in with confidence and have that conversation, and that the full backing of the City Council says, we're with you and we value what you're doing. It will make our city better off. So I think that is one of the more important things we're doing, is that we're saying, as a city, we value our men and women and we want them to be on the same playing field for equal work.
Thank you very much. All right, with that, we'll take a roll call vote of the City Council.
Councilman DeCiccio. Yes. Councilman Gallego.
Yes.
Councilman Gates.
Yes.
Councilman Nowakowski.
Yes.
Councilwoman Pastor.
Yes.
Vice Mayor Valenzuela.
Yes.
Councilman Waring. Councilwoman Williams.
Yes.
Mayor Stanton.
Yes, the item passes unanimously. Congratulations to all involved, and let's move forward. We'll give it a minute for folks who have to move on to other things to have a chance to get out to leave the building, and then we'll move on to the proposed trial budget.
I was already full. Jeff,
all right.
Johnny Max reaches right.
Mr. City Manager, the next item on the agenda. Item number 2, the sequel. The second item number 2 on today's agenda is a presentation of the City Manager's trial budget. Earlier in the meeting, many council members talked about budget hearings. So today is the opportunity for the City Manager to present to the City Council his proposed trial budget. This is not a vote on this budget. It's his opportunity to present what he's recommending to this council and this community. This is the proposed budget that will be taken out to many budget hearings across the city that every member of the council and myself will be actively participating in. The vote on the budget won't be for a few more months, but this is the beginning of our budget process. So with that, Mr. City Manager, your presentation of your proposed budget.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm joined here at the table by our Budget and Research Director, Mario Paniagua, and I also want to thank our department heads and the Budget and Research staff who have worked hard to get us to this point. So I'm pleased today to present a trial budget that is balanced without service cuts and even has some additions of general fund and other fund services that are important to you in the community. The tough decisions that you made over the last year, plus the shared solutions developed with employees, labor, and the community have brought us to this positive position. It's important to take a minute and remember where we were last year at this same time, that the trial budget then was proposing significant cuts to services, seniors, parks, pools, graffiti busters, and so on. Last year, we also, at that time, were projecting that this year we'd have a deficit of about $35 million. And so last year, we worked hard, we balanced the budget without service cuts, and now in 2015-16, we also have a balanced budget that even has some additions. So how did we do that? You made tough choices. Employees made concessions, and everyone pitched in to control costs. So congratulations are due to all. Even with the sunset of the food tax, which happens 1 week from today, and with the state shifting costs and reducing revenue to us, then we have to absorb those right now. This trial budget is balanced and services are protected. So as we look ahead past 2015-16, though, we do see significant challenges to address. We have large increases in the state-controlled police officer and firefighter pension system that we need to be mindful of. But I would say past performance is an indicator of future success. Just like last year, we have already begun work on solutions, and I'll explain those more at the conclusion of the presentation. So with that, we will take a look at the trial budget. As you said, Mayor, we will be taking this out to the community. We are here in March. This is the first step of a long, open, public dialogue, lots of opportunity for input. In April, we will have those community hearings you mentioned. May, the proposed budget will come back as a reflection of the inputs you have received and given. And for June, there will be a final budget adoption. People are able to give feedback in person, at meetings, by email, by phone, in many different ways. So the first part is the general fund budget. The general fund budget is the budget that provides the services that people think of most about the city when they think of police, fire, streets, parks, recreation, libraries, etc. There are no service cuts proposed. In fact, we are proposing some additional investment that I want to take a minute and highlight. First of all, although it is the smallest addition to our budget, it is important because it affects one of the poorest neighborhoods in the city, and that is the Cofelt neighborhood at 19th Avenue and Buckeye Road. And we there are in a partnership with Maricopa County where they provide a facility for the neighborhood and we staff it. Maricopa County is remodeling the facility, and so the Parks Department is proposing, and we're putting in the trial budget to add about $15,000 to add year-round service at Cofelt rather than the part-time that is there today. The second of three additions in the general fund really speaks to the need to continue pursuing innovation. We have reached $98 million in innovation and efficiency savings over the last 5 years towards our goal of $100 million. But we know that to get to the next $100 million, we're really going to have to invest in technology, and it's much more complex tasks. This budget proposes a very modest amount to add one technology staff person to begin the work that it takes to be prepared to move in that direction. Phoenix 311 is a name for moving towards combining all of our call centers and information centers into one more easily accessible place for our residents in many different ways. And that takes technology, that takes some vision for how technology needs to work together. And the second piece that Councilwoman Pastor is beginning work on is also somebody to think about the technology should the council decide to move to a unified municipal services card approach. So this person and the resources needed for that technology work is about $150,000. Then the largest of the three additions to the general fund I want to expand on is police training. This is a very significant investment. Chief Yonner has been very clear that this is important, and it's a priority for us to add training, 40 hours of training for every police officer in the city. That training will cover things such as community relations, mental health awareness and issues, tactics for safety for officers and for the community, and that's important to add as well into our general fund. There are some other additions, and I'll now ask Budget and Research Director Mario Paniagua to take us through those other additions and then give a little more detail about the general fund.
Thank you, Ed, and good afternoon, Mayor and members of the City Council. A month ago, you took action to approve a police officer and firefighter hiring plan. And that plan will increase the number of police officers and firefighters from where we are today. So Ed talked about the general fund, and within the general fund, public safety and criminal justice are the clear priority. 71% of the general fund falls in those categories. But the city does also devote specific funds, specific tax dollars to police and fire. And that's where 100% of those funds directly goes to those purposes. It's possible that we can now advance in the hiring of police officers and firefighters because of a balancing plan that was adopted several years ago by the council, and the fact that the city has stuck very closely to that plan. Our diligence means that we are going to be balanced next year, and we can move forward with the hiring of police officers and firefighters. quickly, as a matter of review, this chart shows what would have happened if that plan had not been put in place. And several years of negative balances would have happened. In fact, this year we would be looking at a negative $160 million balance if the council had not taken action at that time. However, the good news is the council did approve a plan, and because of the steady and disciplined following of that plan over the last several years, this chart shows you what actually happened with those plans. We did have a significant negative balance of about negative $37 million a couple of years ago, but steadily that's been getting closer and closer to balanced. And you can see that in 2015-16, we will be there. So going forward, the city will carefully manage these funds and make sure there is a contingency in each of these funds, as well as making sure that revenues do not exceed expenses. In terms of the hiring for firefighters and police officers, on the screen you see a chart that shows what the planned hiring for firefighters over the next several years is. And on the left column, you see the planned new hires each fiscal year. Alongside that, we see how many expected retirements we anticipate in each of those years, so that we can see really what that means in terms of a projected number of firefighters that we will have in place each year. We will be above 1,600, which is higher than we are today, and we will be able to sustain that moving forward. For police officers, this is good news. And the reason this is such an important issue and really a big deal to us is because there have been several years where we have been unable to hire police officers on an ongoing basis. That means that our field counts have gotten smaller and smaller. And now we are moving forward with hiring for police officers. And you can see next year we're looking at hiring 110 police officers. And that will finally exceed the number of retirements that are expected, and we will begin to grow. So each year moving forward through 18-19, you can see that we will begin to grow in the number of officers through the hiring that takes place. Part of the council's action that occurred a month ago was also with regard to the proposed comprehensive transportation plan and what would happen with funding if that proposed plan were to be approved by the voters. If it's approved by voters, $16 million in general fund money will be freed up, and the council has already directed that $16 million would be devoted to hiring of police officers. And what that means is that 125 more police officers can occur beginning next year and sustained on a regular basis. There are other funds that we have in the city besides the general fund as well. And in these funds, we're able to bring enhancements to the community in this budget. The Aviation Department, which manages Phoenix Sky Harbor International Airport, will add a team of staff to review possible flight path changes and respond to noise complaints from the community and outreach to the community to address this important issue for the city of Phoenix. In the Transit 2000 Fund, there is some funding being added to expand our transit options to residents with the operation of the Northwest Light Rail Extension, which takes it out to 19th Avenue and Dunlap. In the Phoenix Parks and Preserve Initiative Fund, which many people know as 3PI, some funding is added to add new trailheads at Apache Wash, Desert Hills, and Desert Vista so that people can enjoy the natural resources that Phoenix has to provide. In the Development Services Fund, we will see improved front counter service and enhanced electronic plan review and building inspection, all of which are very important to the businesses of the city of Phoenix. We'll see those customer service enhancements reduce wait times and improve the accuracy of information provided. It also allows us to gather, through technological means, more feedback from our customers so we can continue to improve in those areas. And then in the Solid Waste Fund, although the council will be seeing much more about this in the weeks to come and at council meetings coming, there's also funds in the operating budget for the operation and maintenance of a new composting facility at the 27th Avenue transfer station, which will save money by diverting waste from landfills and improve city sustainability. Although the budget's balanced and we are making some additions to the community, there's still a number of needs that the community has. Police officers and firefighters, we did talk about the plan to move forward and advance with the hiring of that, and the possibility of adding even more with the proposed transportation plan. Police body cameras is another area of need, and the police chief has identified potential additional grant funding that can be used to expand the use of body cameras in the city of Phoenix. The transportation plan also includes additional funding for street maintenance beyond the level of service that's provided today. In the area of storm drain infrastructure, this will continue to be discussed in the city's 5-year capital improvement program. The city is working closely with Maricopa County to address important needs in this area, and that will be a part of the discussions on the CIP. Regarding homelessness, the city is working to initiate a public-private partnership with Maricopa County and the Valley of the Sun United Way to address homelessness and provide some permanent housing solutions for the homeless. The list of needs continues and remains long. We also have library hours that haven't been restored fully to what they once were, parks maintenance needs, recreation programming. One area in particular that I want to highlight today, the Transportation and Infrastructure Subcommittee took action on street landscaping maintenance. The subcommittee approved a motion last month to present additional service level options in this area in the context of the overall budget discussion. And so the street landscaping maintenance is essentially what's needed to ensure that trees and shrubs along city roadways are kept from overgrowth and from visual blight. This is an important city function that's been reduced in recent years when budgets were very tight and the city faced very large deficits. But the Transportation and Infrastructure Subcommittee approved a recommendation to consolidate street landscaping into the Street Transportation Department and to issue an invitation for bids to contract out this service. The bidding out of the service has the potential to improve service levels in this area from being only a complaint-based service to also include scheduled maintenance of 3 times per year. Also discussed was the possibility of increasing to a monthly level of service in this area, which would cost an additional $1.5 to $2.5 million a year. Going to a weekly and monthly blended schedule would cost about $4 to $6 million more per year. The City of Phoenix is continuing its zero-based budget reviews, and that remains a very important part of our cost management. So just on that list there are the actions being taken this year, which are going to bring $1.2 million in annual savings. Just to highlight a couple of these, one of the things that we're doing this year is aligning the courtroom and staffing in the municipal court with the activity levels that we're seeing. Filings are down, and so we're able to adjust the courtrooms accordingly. That's going to save about $600,000. We're also able to reduce costs in Human Services Department because of automation with senior center registration. That's going to save some money. Efficiencies in the city manager's office and the city clerk department are also going to save additional money on an ongoing basis. So as the trial budget was being prepared, the initial numbers, as you can see on this chart, showed that we actually had a $4.3 million surplus that could have been used for tackling some of those community needs that we talked about. However, the state recently took action on a budget that does impact several stakeholders throughout the state. Cities and towns were among those. The City of Phoenix was impacted by a total of $6.3 million. We will see our revenue reduced and we'll see our costs go up. And so what that does is it actually creates a deficit to the city of $2 million rather than having a $4.3 million surplus that could have been used to address those challenges. But as you know, the council know, we do need to have a balanced budget. This trial budget is balanced, and the way we get there is to address that additional $2 million deficit is by reducing the amount of vehicles that will be replaced next year, by deferring older vehicles and replacing those on a much later schedule. Those are non-public safety vehicles, and we would be able to reduce those by about $1.4 million. And then we would also reduce the contingency growth by $600,000. However, the contingency would still be growing by about $1.1 million, and takes the contingency level from under 4% to just above 4%. With that budget, the items that were discussed a few moments ago by City Manager Ed Zerker, police training, recreation, and innovation, those are still included in the budget. When we compare 2015-16 to the current year budget, we see that the expenses are up by just under $7 million. $4 million of that is in brand new payments to the state of Arizona, part of their budget balancing actions. Another $1.1 million of that is the contingency fund increase that is proposed. And then finally, we talked about $2.2 million in expanded police training. Other areas where costs went up, like general fund civilian pension went up about $1.3 million, sworn pension went up about $6 million, and healthcare is up about $2.4 million. Those were all offset by other reductions to compensation and other savings in the budget. So in total, the budget is only up by about $6.8 million with those things that you see there. So with that, I'll transition back to Ed for further discussion on some other issues.
So as I talked about at the beginning, we do also need to keep our eyes on the future. And we started that last month with our best practice 5-year forecast to take a look at what is happening down the road. First thing that affects us in that is the state has made some actions that impact the revenue that we have there. Actions on income tax have decreased those collections, and so that affects us in the future with income tax sharing. And also adjustments and changes made to the TPT, or the sales tax on contracting. We're also seeing a decline in those revenues based on some actions taken at the state. But certainly the largest impact on our future budget has to do with a pension. So I just want to take a minute to focus on this, because this has been the subject of some conversation. First of all, there are two pension systems in the city, as you know. The civilian pension, known as COPERS, is controlled by the City Council, and the Mayor and City Council should take great pride, I think, in the efforts that have been undertaken so far with the voters of Phoenix to bring reform to the COPERS system within the legal limits allowed by the Constitution and contract law. And as you see by this chart, your actions have stopped the growth of pension costs in civilians and actually begins to bring it down. The story is a little different, however, on our public safety pension cost side. And the costs there, if we look to the past, have nearly doubled between 2007, 2008, and the present, from $70 million on the far left to almost $140 million in this year's budget for the pensions for police officers and firefighters. That pension is controlled by the state of Arizona, known as Public Safety Personnel Retirement System, PSPRS. And that is what we're really paying attention to here. So if we look at the next slide, there has been a recent action taken, and PSPRS has informed us that as part of retiring the unfunded liability, plus paying back the costs attributed to something called the Fields decision, a Supreme Court decision about previous reforms at the state level, we have two options for dealing with our public safety pension moving forward. In this it shows, this shows the 3-year phase-in option that was given to us. So in this year we were at $137 million, and we can step into that increased cost from the state over a 3-year period, as shown here. This trial budget is based on this phase-in. The other alternative was to immediately take the cost right away. And this next slide will show you with the red what that would have done. So the blue is what this budget is based on. $143 million of cost next year, which is $6 million more than this year. Or in the red, if we had taken it all at once, we would have actually had a $177 million cost in that second set of bars. So we would be facing a $30+ million deficit this year in order to pay this cost. This budget, my trial budget presented to you, says that the blue is the line that we can manage as we look to the future. And the real issue there is that we need to continue to provide services to the community that the community expects. With the phase-in, we're able to preserve those services. It allows us that period of time to make plans and figure out strategies to deal with those increases in the future. And it also gives time for the state to do some reform. But as I said, we're doing other things. And so as we look to the future, we're going to continue to aggressively pursue savings. Currently, a group of employees representing labor unions, associations, and all levels of the organization are digging into possible ways to cut our health care costs while retaining our quality. We're going to be talking to Councilman Gates' subcommittee about that in April. You also passed LED street light plan that should save us up to $800,000 a year in electricity costs. That gives us some flexibility. You've continued to authorize us to dispose of underused properties and excess properties. And of course, we'll continue the zero-based budget review. So in summary, this trial budget is balanced. It allows us to continue police officer and firefighter hiring. It allows us to initiate some very much needed training in the police department. And in other non-general fund areas, it adds significant community services. With that, Mayor, we're happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. City Manager and our Budget Director, Mario Paniagua. Any questions from members of this council? Councilman DeCiccio.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a few questions, and I may reserve the right to bring up some more later. But in regards to this budget, does it include maximizing the primary? And if so, what is that? That's one of the questions I forgot to ask you today, Ed, when we were meeting.
Mayor and Councilman DeCiccio, yes, this does include an assumption that the primary would be maximized in accordance with the there are actually two levels. There's a state level which allows for a 2% growth plus new building and new construction. There's also the city charter which caps the primary rate at $1 plus any amount for libraries. And so we're actually maximizing not quite to the state level, but to the charter level, which is where we're at the point where we're at $1 plus the library.
Just give me what I know back in 2009, and that's where my charts go back. It was $1.05 was on the secondary. What would the secondary be today?
Let's see,
approximately. I mean, I didn't mean to blindside you on that one, but that's a question I ask every year.
So the total property tax is $1.82.
The total property tax is $1.82. The primary rate's actually coming down by a little bit, by about a penny, from $1.35 to $1.34, and the secondary rate will be going up from 47 cents to 48 cents.
8.40. But we're still maximizing because it's the amount of total dollars that come in.
We're maximizing the primary in accordance with the law.
What is the so it went from $1.35 to $1.34. That's just the rate number. What is the amount of shift that maximizing the primary creates? What is that shift differential? How many millions is that a year?
Councilman DeCiccio, that I will need to get back to you on. I don't have that on hand right now.
We got a long time to debate the budget later too. And just so if I could, Mayor, and I'll bring this up repeatedly on this, is that when we look at infrastructure at the City of Phoenix, the City of Phoenix has had this policy for several years now. It's called maximizing the primary. What it does is it takes money away from streets and capital projects that the public wants to see completed and moves them into operations. And a lot of it deals with the fact that we still had significant problems dealing with our operational budget. And if you look at it at least long term, and if you look at the public, and if you look at our own homes, it's no different than how we run our homes. Short-term problems create long-term problems that end up either creating a bankruptcy later on in life, or it creates a financial situation that you cannot get out of. So your short-term dealings, which is things like this, maximizing the primary, shifting money from capital projects, which we have to have as a city in order to be viable, to operations day-to-day, buying pencils and papers and salaries and all that. By shifting those dollars over the years, one, we've created a significant structural problem within the city of Phoenix, but we've also created a problem where we're not going to be able to keep up with our infrastructure, which we saw with some of the reports. We're close to what I think $1 billion behind just on infrastructure alone. So that is something we could have easily kept up with had we stayed with that policy of just keeping things stable, but we didn't. I do appreciate the fact that what you've worked on, Ed, in particular, are things that are trying to find ways to save money. And Mario, you've done a fantastic job as budget director. You really have. I mean, you've been fantastic here at the city. And I know there's always an issue of whether or not your projections are correct, but they are just projections. And people couldn't even get the oil market straight. I mean, people lost billions, if not trillions of dollars because their projections were off. And these are people in hedge funds. So, but let me go through a couple more things too. As a city, we're not going to, and this is not a good budget. It really isn't. It literally says the city of Phoenix has a financial crisis on its hands and still not figuring it out. There are some positive things that the city manager is doing, in particular when it comes to the medical services that the city provides, and I appreciate the fact that you're working with the labor groups on that. But those are some of the edge things that will happen until real strategic change occurs and reforms occur here, fiscal reforms. We're going to constantly be doing this, which we should anyways, but we'll never get ahead of the curve. And there's a reason why we are failing literally, and we've got these problems years ahead, and we're only one of 2 cities in the entire valley that have this, is because, and I understand the political makeup of this council, but at the end of the day, we have got to be pushing, and maybe there's a way for us to come to some level of compromise on these strategic functions that need to occur. There was a study done out from Alex Tauber, he's one of the heads of Stanford, that I've been trying to get the city to look at least, and that's really looking at what you call strategic functions. And that would be police and fire would be a strategic function. And for the police officers that are in the room here, I would be very worried about your pension and whether or not you're ever going to get it. The way, if you look at the funding that's out there right now, I don't know how I don't know how that catches up to that, but let's hope that it does. But at the end of the day, we've got to look at strategic functions in the city, and we've got to make a determination. It's a very simple determination. Is this a strategic function? Yes or no? If the answer is yes, that is something we fund internally. If it's something that is a non-strategic function, which there could be a variety of things, then those are things we have to make a determination. Is this something that we as a city see in our mission? If it's not, then we need to find a way to move it out. If it is something we see it in our mission, then the next question is this something that we as a city need to be doing, or should we be looking at outside entities to be able to deliver that service? For example, every time we hire an individual at the city of Phoenix, we've now committed to that person for at least 50 years. Thank God that they would, pray to God that they would be there 50 years, but 50 years, 20 years working, probably 30 years after. You make that commitment, you now take care of that person for the next 50 years, every single person we hire. So that means every decision we make day to day, whether we should or should not hire those, has to be based on whether or not we want to make that 50-year commitment. And does it need to happen on all functions that we do in government? I don't believe it does. I talked to Arizona State University, even they, which you consider to be Arizona State, U of A, and I believe some of the other major universities are looking at these strategic functions, something that we must be doing. And that comes primarily to pension costs. I met with them. They're even looking at finding a way to phase out non-strategic functions out of their pension liability. That's something that we should be doing. Things that are non-strategic need to be phased out. If you've got police officers, almost all of us think that we should have a police officer and they should be run by the city of Phoenix. I'm one of those that believes that as well. But outside of that, there are other functions that are non-strategic that we need to look at phasing out. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you very much. Other comments by members of this council? Councilman Waring.
Do you know what I guess there are no page numbers on this. So for the public safety costs, you went back to 2007, 2008. For the COPERS costs, you just start in the current fiscal year. Do you have the number for 2007, 2008 for how much that's gone up the previous, I guess, 7 years?
Mayor, Councilman Waring, the amount of COPER's costs in 2007, 2008 was about $66 million.
So it basically doubled in the same period of time, too. I mean, roughly, I guess I'd have to. The public safety pension costs went from $70 million to $137 million to this current fiscal year, so they basically doubled. Slightly less of an increase in COPERS, but I guess I'd be curious if the council had taken action. I guess previous councils had taken action in years gone by. Maybe we could have got a more flat trajectory quite some time ago, but alas. All right, so I am curious, we're borrowing money, right, to spread out the payments for the pension costs because of the court case. Is that a fair statement?
Mayor, Councilman Waring, thank you for asking that because it's important to clarify that. We are not borrowing money. We are taking an option that they have to pay in a different set of installments. So there's no borrowing happening. There's no debt in that way. It's, if you go to that chart, Mario, it is, you can either step into this over a 3-year period or take the payment in the first year. Really, it's really in the first 2 years there. If you see the significant increase in the 15-16 preliminary to the 16-17 is higher as well.
So, but we're paying more money.
We will, over 22 years, we will pay more money. But in the first 2 years, we will pay less money.
But overall, we're paying more money.
Over the 22-year period, based on their schedule, yes, it will be more, about $6 million. You see it happening there as it goes farther to the right, where the blue is slightly higher than the red on through.
So I'm curious, if that's not borrowing, what do you call it?
I call it using the phase-in payment plan. I guess the distinction I'm making is it's not as if we have a loan from somebody where there's a note. This is a payment method that we're choosing.
But they're charging us more money to do it this way.
Starting in 17-18, yes, the payments in those years are slightly higher than they would be if we had done it. What I'm saying, though, is that this 3-year phase-in gives us time to use this year and next year to find ways to be able to continue services to the community and plan for that without having to make immediate cuts to services today. Remember, this is a long-term liability. A pension is a long-term liability, as Councilman DeCiccio mentioned, and so it's sort of like a mortgage. You have a mortgage balance, and I guess you could pay a 30-year mortgage off in 1 year if you chose to. But what good does that do you if that takes all your cash flow away from being able to buy food and clothes for your family? So that's really, I think, how I would put it in terms of a personal choice.
But the mortgage ends, our payment obligations will never end.
The mortgage in this case also ends. That big, they're amortizing it over a 22-year period.
So I mean, council members, long after, I guess, with term limits, even if a couple of you in your first years ran for mayor sometime, I mean, you know, 20-year window max, I guess I'd say you're putting off these costs on council members years into the future. I guess I just don't see how that's necessarily responsible. Is there some other thing that's not a capital project that we're doing this? Some other budget item where we're doing this?
Where we're doing a phase-in?
Well, yeah, I mean, we know the costs are here. We've incurred them now. We already owe the money. It's a debt.
It's a long-term liability, yes.
In my mind, we're taking out a loan and borrowing money to pay a debt we've already incurred. But we're going to have people making budget decisions 20 years from now or 22 years from now that's going to be impacted. They're going to be able to hire fewer police officers, open fewer parks, whatever, to some degree, because we're doing this today. Are there other things that we're pushing off like this? I mean, we wouldn't push off I don't know what, is there an example that would even be close to this?
Well, it's a long-term
liability. Have we ever done this
Yeah.
before? I guess
It's a long-term liability, and we're paying it down over time. We're on a payment plan. They've given us two options. We're meeting our obligations through the 3-year phase-in option. I guess the most similar thing I could think of is when a council decides to issue general obligation bonds for capital projects. That is something that gets paid off over a series of years, and that decision does impact how much money future councils have to spend because we're paying debt on capital projects.
But
So
we'll actually have the building or the park or whatever. At the
in
end
this
of this,
case, we
we'll
have the police officers and the firefighters.
I mean, they're going to be retired. Those council people in the distant future are going to have, they're just going to have the obligation.
And that's why it's so important for there to be state reform of the system, because it really identifies the issue that reform has to happen here, and this really illustrates the need for that. It's why it's so important that we've reformed COPERS.
You anticipated my next question. So on this page, the public safety pension costs, the third bullet point is potential state reform.
Right.
This has already happened. This is history. Potential reform in the future doesn't affect what you're talking about, borrowing or whatever phrase we want to use. That'll already have happened. The way this is laid out, the 3-year phase-in allows, you got continued service to the community, time for prudent fiscal planning, and then 3, potential state reform, but the potential state reform is not going to reduce our liability, correct?
It depends on what the reform is. If there's a method for reform that is able to
retroactive
to deal with that. I don't know. I mean, it's got to be done within the Constitution and contract law. But I know that
given
there
the
have been
complexity of those two
proposals
things, that seems unlikely. But
there have been proposals from the firefighters union, for example, that would potentially get into the existing liability.
So since you brought up the firefighters, you know, Brian Jeffries used to serve on this council, represented the area I serve now. I think he and I have met several times, and I've talked about this subject. I applaud him for getting out ahead of the curve and trying to work on this. We have, I think we're spending $1,063,000 or something on our lobbying team, some of which is going down to the Capitol. They're working on a lot of bills. I guess we're going to talk about them in a minute. Some of them are less than major, and maybe more time should be spent working with Jeffries and others to try to address this, given that it's a huge, big-ticket item. Are we doing that? Because that has not been suggested to me in any way.
We have a representative in a working group at the League of Arizona Cities and Towns. Rick Neymark is actually our person who's been working there to address options presented by the firefighters and other ideas.
I mean, this has been out there for a while. I mean, years, I think. So, I mean, I guess what's the holdup at this point? It certainly would be cheaper to have the legislature vote to put something on the ballot. I'm not saying I agree with every possible plan and so forth. I'm just saying something has to happen here soon. Every day that goes by, as Councilman DeCiccio suggests, every time we hire somebody, we're now making these long-term, extremely expensive, can we even afford it, obligations. So are we down there trying to rustle up votes for Jeffries? What are we?
Well, I can't speak to what's holding the legislature up from making a decision on this. I don't know.
I don't know.
That's not a real proposal, though. I mean, if you talk to the business, oh, sorry, didn't mean to interrupt, but
I'm just saying, are they doing anything? I mean, are they working with it to get a real proposal?
Doesn't do anything.
So, all right. In any case, I'm skeptical that potential state reform belongs on this page, saying that this is somehow going to impact the borrowing that we're talking about here. The deficit for next year, so not the fiscal year we're talking about, for the next year. What's that deficit?
For 2016-17, Mario?
Councilman Waring, the deficit that we are looking at for 2016-17 is actually a range that was provided in our 5-year forecast. If you just give me 1 second to look that up. One of the things that we sent to the City Council this last week was an update to our forecast, which demonstrated the long-term impact of the fiscal actions by the state, which include the state budget as well as some of the other actions they've taken. But at this point now, the range of the deficit for 16-17 is between $36 and $63 million.
Of 36 and 63 million, and that doesn't include the potential, is it 18 million on the apartment issue? Because I think that's dead for this year, but could come back next year, is that right?
Correct. This is based on
So it could get
existing
worse,
tax authority.
I guess it could be adding based on bills that could pass next year before this budget that we're talking about we'd be working on, or we'd be working on at the same time they'd be passing these bills. You talked about how we closed, I think it was a $35 million gap, and that's great, except for one thing, well, two things, probably from the employee perspective. You cut employee compensation in the contracts and increased taxes and fees by about, what, like 10 million. Do we have a list of fees and taxes that we're talking about increasing to close this larger gap for next year? Has anybody put pen to the paper? Because I'm curious what that is. And second, have the employees expressed a willingness to take a cut again in the contracts next year that would take effect in fiscal year 16-17?
So two answers there. Number one is we haven't started negotiations for next year, but I can't imagine any employee group ever proposes cuts. But I can't comment on what is going to happen with that. But the second thing is I think we have to remember that we actually cut taxes this year. When the food tax expires a week from today, that will make a significant tax reduction even with the 1% addition in fees revenue in last year's budget. So that counterweighs, more than counteracts the increases that were part of last year's revenue.
But that will be ancient history by the time 2016-17 hits. So it's kind of immaterial. I mean, I guess you could propose bringing back the food tax. I, to the surprise of no one, will not be the one to propose that. But that's the kind of numbers that you're talking about. I think that brought in, what, $55 million or something, and we're talking about a deficit of 36 to 63, plus potential. I mean, I guess we could be going up to over 80. Doesn't sound like any plan I've heard, and Councilman DeCiccio has pointed out, we really got to start looking at some of the stuff we're paying money for, because you can't, I mean, if it starts getting to $20 an hour at the meters, I think that will get people noticed. You can't keep raising the water bill continuously, the jail tax, whatever it was called. I guess we got a serious issue. To say that this year's budget is balanced, I guess is great, but with this looming, really what I would call almost a crisis, because I don't really see any serious movement on the pension front with the police and fire. I mean, in the absence of a bill, in the absence of the city putting forth a proposal, I haven't seen anything from the League of Cities and Towns about here's what we're going to try to do. Whether, Councilman DeCiccio raised the point, maybe it's not a good plan, but at this point, maybe any plan that might address the problem might be preferable to the status quo, where we start talking about whether we can even pay the pensions. Much less our continuing obligations a year from now. It's not, people have always pushed this off like this is something way off in the future. Well, I'm afraid to say I think it's here. So for one more year, maybe we can get by, but I don't know. Well, I'll leave it. It's been going a while. I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Councilman, did you want representatives of the Professional Firefighter Association and Arizona Police Association to come before this council?
I think that'd be great.
All right, I appreciate that. Other members of the council? Vice Mayor.
Sure, thanks, Mayor. I want to commend our city staff for getting us to this point. I want to just remind everyone that we are balancing this budget. We are balancing this budget, and the projections, about a year ago was that we were going to come into another deficit. And there's been a lot of work done to get to this point to actually brings us into a soft landing. There was one more effort that was taken. Well, let me correct that. In spite of all of the efforts, in the final hour, when the governor balanced the budget, that was another few $1 million that we had to come up with. And still, we're finding a way to balance this budget. We are finding a way to advance the things that are important to our city, things like transportation and infrastructure with the Northwest Light Rail extension. A number of other issues. One that I would really want to point to is what the police department will be doing in training. Every police officer getting that 40-hour block of training. I believe the price tag there is about $2.2 million. $2.2 million, but 40-hour block of training that highlights things like mental illness, which I will tell you as a first responder, it's more prevalent than people think. and finding a way to continue to put those things in the budget to move this city forward. It's not easy. So I do appreciate my colleagues on the council that help move us in a direction to make some very tough decisions that gets us to a point of actually balancing this budget. And I want to thank city staff, starting with Ed Zerker, for having the strong leadership that it takes and getting creative and doing the things that you had to do to keep this thing moving forward, bringing us into, like, again, a soft landing when it's time to actually take this out to the public. Now, this is a good time of year. This is budget hearing time, and this is an opportunity for us to take it out to the public. This is just a trial budget, and the public will have an opportunity to help shape and mold it. I don't think we've ever had. I don't think we've ever adopted a trial budget at the end that is identical. There's always something that has been different, and that's just a sign that this is something that public input is. Public input will have is something that is certainly weighed when it comes down to the actual budget that is voted on. The COBRs and what you had there, the slides show that what we did in a couple of years ago, what the voters did March of 2013 by voting for the responsible pension reform that took place. It worked. That the unfunded liability that we can control, we have a handle on it, and we're moving forward in that area as well. Now, this in August there'll be another ballot initiative that continues us in that same direction. What we do not control, and Ed, I'm glad you mentioned it, was the public safety retirement system, PSPRS, and what we can do, I guess, is, each of us have a network. Each of us have friends, people that we speak with, probably even on a daily basis, who are legislators over at the Capitol. I would advise we call our friends and ask them to take a look at some of the things that the city of Phoenix has done to get that unfunded liability under control, because that number is growing. It's a very real number. I don't think anyone here is dodging that number. I think we absolutely have to get serious when it comes to finding a way to deal with it. I think we lead by example here at the city of Phoenix. Again, what we did in 2013 and what the voters did in 2013 speaks to that. But we're getting to a point here where we really need some action over at the state. I commend the Professional Firefighters of Arizona. Of course, they're working with the Arizona Police Association for leading that conversation. I'm optimistic. I know that many of those conversations are being had as we speak, but I'm really looking forward to the day that something is passed out of there that helps us deal with that unfunded liability as it pertains to the first responders as well. And I'm speaking as a first responder who, all of us are impacted by that. And so, again, I'll just close out by saying, thank you. I think a couple of things I don't want to be lost is we were headed towards a deficit here, and it wasn't a small deficit. I mean, what was it, mid-30s, I think? $34, $35 million deficit is where we were headed. That was the discussion about a year ago. Very tough decisions were made. Strong leadership by our city staff gets us to a point where, again, we are adding service to this budget, and we're balancing it, and that's a big deal. Now, we have to continue getting creative, and that leadership must continue to get us there next year. But this is something to be celebrated.
Thank you very much, Vice Mayor. Councilman Gates.
Thank you, Mayor. Mario and Ed, I really want to thank you for the 5-year planning and the 5-year budget. I think this is a great example. If we were just going 1 year at a time, we'd say, hey, this is great. We've got a balanced budget, nothing to worry about. So obviously by shining a light on, you're not hiding the fact, that we've got issues moving forward. So to me, that's a big improvement on where we were when I started on the council. I think we can't diminish the fact that the food tax is going away. I mean, that's a significant accomplishment. It's said oftentimes that once a tax is passed, it never is repealed, and this one was, and it was due to the hard work of a lot of people up here on the dais. But I think that's something we really do need to appreciate, and it's significant because it was a promise kept to the people. Clearly, we need action on PSPRS, and no, is there the perfect plan out there for reform? No, but at least the discussion is beginning. And I would say for the governor, his focus and the focus of the team was the budget the first year. He was faced with a huge hole, and I really think that's where the focus was. But now as we move into the second year, I think it is the ideal time to start addressing this and to get everybody to come to the table and look at these kinds of numbers and realize that we all need to sit down and figure this out. And I will certainly encourage that, and I know that others up here on the dais will do the same. So that that's something that we can try and impact, but we can't really control it. But the things that we can control, Mr. Zuercher, I appreciate that you're really tackling that with health care. We're going to have a special meeting, I think as was alluded to, of the efficiency subcommittee on April 7th. We're going to have a real good discussion about this, and some innovative ideas are going to be put on the table, and I look forward to the engagement of people in the community and the engagement of our employee groups to look at these innovative ideas where we can really make a difference, and a difference in the millions of dollars a year. I think that's important. I think we've seen some reduction in workers' comp costs, but I challenge staff to continue to push on that. Those sorts of things are things that are apolitical that we can address, and we should continue to push on those. So, it's not perfect. Certainly we've got a lot to work on, but again, we are light years ahead from a transparency standpoint of where we were, again, when I came on the council, a zero-based budget, and so many other things, a 5-year planning process. So at least when we do these things, we get them out on the table. We're going to have disagreements on how to address them. But then finally, and I think one of the real values of this 5-year plan is that our employee groups see these numbers just like we do, and I think they need to bring realistic expectations to the table next year when we go into negotiations again. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you very much. Other members of the council, any comments? Councilman DeCiccio, more comments.
Thank you, Mayor. Yep. Well, when you're talking about budgeting, this is the thing that I actually like to talk about. The situation with the pensions, I mean, we cannot constantly think that others are going to solve our problems for us. We have to be thinking ahead of that. And turning to the state and saying the state needs to do these things, we need to be solving it internally. And that's why we need to move toward more strategic thinking at the City of Phoenix. In regards to the union proposal for pension reform, the reason that has got no traction so far, zero traction, is that it is the union proposal. They haven't sat down with the business community. They haven't put the proposal together in conjunction with others. Likewise, if we're going to have the unions come in here and tell us what their idea of pension reform is, because we're seeing it right now with this crisis, that is their idea of pension reform, is to have everybody at the table. We should have the league here to present their proposal. We should also have the business community and those business leaders to present their proposal. At least we can get an idea that's fair and balanced across the board rather than just having the unions here. The unions are not going to get their deal through, at least I hope not. It's too bad because they have an opportunity to make it work, but they refuse to sit down and actually negotiate and try to put a proposal together that everybody can be on board. So they'll have to go to the streets, get their signatures, spend $1 million. Then you'll see the legislature put at least 2 or 3 other options on the table. That'll more than likely occur there. So there'll be something competing with that. So again, we cannot rely on others solving the problem. We have to do this ourselves, and we're going to have to find a way to compromise on this thing and find a way to make it work, because the path we're on right now, and if you're a firefighter or a police officer, If you think you're going to get your pension, the way it's going right now, good luck. I hope that we do. There's another proposal out there that says that you have to pay the unfunded pension debt. What that means is that you have to pay the obligation and the promise you made to those police officers. I like it. It was something that we were looking at doing. By doing that, though, it means you got to bring it up to 80%, and you have to bring in a real number, a real, not a 7.3, 7.75% or 7.5% rate of return, but a rate of return based on an index that says we should be paying back. So we owe the money, then we ought to find a way to pay them. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you very much. Vice Mayor.
Just one point. Again, COBRS is something that the city controls, that we take votes on. We voted, and we sent that ballot initiative in, for the March 2013 election. The voters spoke loud and clear. It passed. And our unfunded liability, you know, we can say that we actually have a plan for that, and it's under control. We're moving to a point, you can see where that's going to happen. I want to be very careful, because when we start talking about public safety retirement system and letting the state handle it for us, and to the viewer, it may sound like we control that as well, and we don't. That's a different retirement system that is controlled at the state. And of course, we're on the hook for it. We pay for it because these are, every city is, every municipality, but that is controlled at the state. And I just want to be very clear that as we have this discussion on pension, that people realize that, we need to, I would ask that everyone call their legislator, their state senator, ask about the conversation there. I'm one of them, having that, asking those questions there. That has to happen there. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you very much. Any additional comments by members of this council? All right, so we probably will then, taking Councilman Waring's suggestion, have Arizona Police Association and professional firefighters talk about proposals for pension reform and issues about strategy about how to get it done. And thank you very much, Mr. City Manager, for this presentation. This is the first step in this very long process. Obviously, we'll be having a series of meetings with the community, getting their ideas, thoughts, suggestions, proposed changes to our budget. When will it come then back before this council for a vote?
Thank you, Mayor. I believe it is May the 4th.
May 5th for a review of the next proposed budget, and then 2 weeks after that for a vote of the council.
Okay. Greta Rogers, you want to provide testimony on this item? While you're coming up, Councilman Passero, do you have a quick? Was it a long question or a short question on budget? I'll wait for either. Okay, wait till Greta's done. No problem.
Mayor, members of the council, and people in attendance. I want to start off by bringing to your attention the lead article in the paper this morning on pensions, a well-researched and well-written article by a man whose name wasn't familiar to me, Doronico, but he's done a good job. The PSRPS is in the state that it's in, and all the cities and towns in this state are paying the penalty for the legislature at some year not mentioned in the past, violating what the law about it says and reducing the numbers. And the court said, no, it's not lawful. You have to pay the full amount, and therefore the increase is effective, due, and payable now. And I commend Mr. Zerker for doing the installment plan, because if he hadn't, we'd be driving on corduroy roads and holes a hell of a lot worse than they are today. He's done the right thing, and this isn't borrowing. And you can talk figures and facts, and they fool, and they don't tell the truth. I commend Mario and Jeff for excellent, detailed, thoughtful, arduous work putting this proposed budget together, along with Ed's counsel and cooperation. The figures I have were from the slides that were presented 2 weeks ago at policy, and they changed slightly today. But the point is, we have to work together, as you suggested, Mr. Gates, thank you, and compromise. Labor, non-labor, council, and the citizens. And I look forward to the hearings. I've always gone to many since the year 2000, and this year will be no different. I simply ask of those of you who host these meetings at our community centers or wherever the venue is, but most of them are at community centers. Those are our homes for meeting, our neighborhood homes to meet as a community. And you come as a guest to our homes, and I request that anyone who wishes to speak at those meetings has a minimum of 3 minutes and a max of 4. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Rogers. Councilman Pastor, you had a question?
Yes, so Greta, you're leading me into my question. At the budget meetings, what is the design of the budget meetings in the sense of, are we asking our constituents to come up with solutions? Are we asking, I'm curious as to what the makeup of these meetings are going to be like.
Mayor, Councilman Pastor, so what happens is we have a write-up of the budget that people have to read and comment on. And then we really invite anything. If people have solutions to offer, if they have criticisms of whatever, observations. A lot of times, as Councilman Valenzuela said, people bring up things we hadn't seen or observed, and it leads to us doing more inquiry. But it really is a forum for the public to give us solutions, options, complaints, praise, whatever it happens to be. We take all that together and use that to evaluate as we come back on May the 5th.
Okay, because my first experience in a budget meeting was don't cut this, don't cut that. However, we are looking to a future of a deficit, and we do need to come with solutions. And I am asking the public, when they participate in these budget hearings, that they come with solutions, or we have a honest dialogue in the sense of, if this happens, then this may happen. So how do we then maintain keep our services up at the level that we need to keep them up? And what are some creative solutions on doing that, or innovative solutions on doing that? Or what public partnerships can we go and explore? I really want this to be a budget meeting that is fruitful, that is meaningful, and that we can come up with ways of solving this. Just only because in the 5 that we had, it was don't cut, do this, do that, and I rather have, okay, if we have to cut, what are we going to cut? Rank. Start ranking. What's the most important thing for you and your family? How do we look at this? That's just my thoughts for as we go into this and as we move forward into the future. I'm really now, I know we're talking about 2015, 2016. I am now really in 2016, 2017. That's where my mindset is, in the sense of how do we 2 years out start forecasting and really working on a solution. So.
Thank you very much. Mr. Manager, as part of the budget presentation that professional staff makes at the various budget hearings, they include this year's proposed budget, and they do a section on the proposed 5-year forecast.
Mayor, I think we would largely follow the outline of this presentation today. We'd have to have a little more detail for people, but yes, basically following this outline.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions or comments by members of the council? Councilman Gallego?
I agree with Councilwoman Pastor. I liked the direction that the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee went with saying people want more street maintenance, present a few options for how that might be paid for, and then once there's the price tag attached, people can provide real feedback, because I think there are many areas where most of us would like to see service improvements, but it really comes down to the financial side. So, for example, this week in District 8, we had a parking lot where the police gave what appears to be hundreds of dust tickets. I don't know if I have an accurate sample of how many people called us upset at 3rd and Roosevelt. And so some of them have said, well, put your air quality person at the City of Phoenix on that. And we eliminated that position, so we can't see if there's a better way to deal with air quality than giving tickets to people who had no idea they were doing anything wrong. And so we've been talking to people, well, you know, how would you pay for it if we added back that air quality administrator? So there's lots of things we want, but putting that funding source attached helps us have a more accurate conversation about what to do. So I agree with Councilwoman Pastor's suggestion.
Thank you very much. Any other comments by members of this council? All right. Thank you very much. We'll see you at the budget hearings.
Thank you.
Next item on the agenda is item number 2 for the 3rd time. Item number 2 on the agenda is our proposed legislative update. There's a lot of activity at the legislature. It's moving very quickly. Tom Remus, enlighten us.
Mayor and Council, thank you for having us here today. I'm Tom Remus with the Office of Government Relations. Joining me today is John Gonzalez. In light of the late hour, I will abbreviate my comments and just say that the legislature is moving quickly. The estimated hope for sine die is April 9th, so that's been extended for about a week later than folks had hoped for. There's about 350 bills that are still moving through the process. And today we saw a lot of movement on floor action, and we expect to see that in the coming weeks. Today we're before you asking for direction on 9 bills listed A through I in your packets. The links to the actual bills were sent to you last week. We're additionally ready to talk about any strike everything bills that might have appeared since the packet went out, and we're open to answering any questions and taking direction on that. In our PowerPoint presentation, we have structured a little bit differently, hopefully to capture direction from Council. We have started with bills to support, then we'll move to bills to oppose, and then bills to oppose based on preemption of local control. So they might not go alphabetically, but they still have the letter next to them for your reference. So with that, I will start off talking about our first bill that we're looking for council support on. It's House Bill 2322, Misbranded Drugs, Counterfeit Marks. This bill was brought to the Phoenix Police Department by the pharmaceutical industry looking for assistance in addressing those pharmaceuticals that have been misbranded and are traded on the streets. What they're looking to do is up the penalty to a Class 4 felony and further define this measure. This has been supported by the pharmaceutical industry and the Arizona Pharmacy Alliance.
And the other bill, letter H, House Bill 2324. This is a bill that was crafted between the League of Cities and Towns and the Counties Supervisors Association. Really what it does is it codifies certain type of language that would be included in intergovernmental agreements between government entities when they're collaborating on public works projects. And this clearly defines the responsibility for each government agency should an accident or something like that occur.
So, Mayor, these are the 2 bills that we're asking for council direction to support.
All right, we have a motion on these two bills. You want to do them together, separately? It's up to the pleasure of this council. Councilman Gallego.
Move approval of both bills.
We have a motion and a second. Any comments by members of this council? All in favor say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Passes unanimously. Who's on the phone? I apologize. Councilman Gates?
Yes.
Okay, excellent. Okay, please.
Under the section of bills to oppose, letter B, Senate Bill 1169, this bill in its current form takes the current fire code standards and it basically relaxes the requirements of the ability to make sure that those buildings that have to stay open but don't meet fire code, that it relaxes the standards of training. It also relaxes the standard of liability, and so from a public safety standpoint, from the fire department's standpoint, it's a concern. Also, it would require that local fire marshals would have to inspect schools of 5,000 square feet or less. This is something that the local fire departments have never done. It's always been under the state fire marshal. So for these reasons, we're asking to oppose.
Why don't we do that one individually then? Any questions on SB 1169? Do we have a motion?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, so
Conference locked.
Letter C, Senate Bill 1335. This is a bill that's moving through the process that basically, if there's certain developments, certain buildings that don't have access to adequate water supplies or have access to major thoroughfares, what it does is it puts a restriction on local government from requiring sprinklers in some of these buildings or building adequate roads to handle fire trucks if an emergency occurs. What this bill is, not only does it prohibit cities and towns from requiring that, but what it also does is that it would allow the individual, the property owner, to file a private right of action against the city that would require these mandates under those circumstances. And because of that, again, it's about public safety for the fire department. Staff is recommending to oppose.
all right, do we have questions on SB 1335? We have a motion.
Given some of the issues we've had, particularly in the Levine area of my district with mulch fires and inadequate water supplies, I would move we oppose.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right.
Letter E, Senate Bill 1133, another bill moving through the process. What this bill would say that is if an individual or a business owner believes that they paid the incorrect amount of TPT or sales tax on an item, or maybe they shouldn't have paid it, that instead of getting that money back from the business that collected the tax, they can go to the Department of Revenue and just get that. As a reminder for the council, remember we're in a TPT state, a transaction privilege tax state. So what that means is that the responsibility to pay the proper taxes is not on the individual that's buying the product. It's on the business that's collecting the tax to remit to government. So there's concern from Department of Revenue, who is they're opposing the bill. The League of Arizona Cities is opposing the bill because not only does it turn the entire TPT concept upside down in Arizona, but also in the future you could have individuals filing claims, but there's no paperwork or documentation to prove if it's true or not. So with that is the basis for opposition.
All right. Do we have any questions on SB 1133? We have a motion on SB 1133.
Move to oppose.
Second.
We have a motion. We have a second. All in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? It passes. All right, next item.
Mayor, Council, as I mentioned, we have a new grouping here. Bills to oppose based on preemption of local control. These are bills that do tap into that general principle that the Mayor and Council provided to staff. The first bill on this list is House Bill 2320. It is firearms permit holders in public places. We're recommending opposition since this measure allows individuals with valid concealed carry permits to bring their weapons into public buildings. That includes city halls, libraries, senior centers, public events, unless the building has security personnel and metal detectors at each entrance. Under current law, Individuals carrying a firearm into public facilities must check their weapon if there is proper signage and gun lockers made available. The city currently complies with that current state law. City staff is concerned with the potential cost of implementing this measure. The Arizona Department of Administration estimated that it will cost the state approximately $10 to $16.9 million in the first year to implement this, and $9.4 to $15.7 million after, each year after. Maricopa County has put together numbers on all of their buildings and have estimated that it will be a $47 million in ongoing annual costs and a $9 million one-time equipment cost for them. The Arizona Chamber of Commerce, the Greater Phoenix Chamber of Commerce, and other chambers of commerce throughout the state are opposed, as well as groups such as library associations. This bill was heard and passed in the Appropriations Committee today.
All right, so on the local control bills, we can take them one by one or do them as a group. I'm guessing we want to take it one by one because individual council members maybe have individual comments. But on this one, staff is recommending that we oppose this bill based on local control considerations. Correct. Do you have any comments, members of the council, on HB 2320? We have a motion on HB 2320.
I move that we oppose.
We have a motion to oppose. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any comments or questions, members of this council? All in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? No. All right, so it passes. Next item.
House Bill 2570 is another bill moving through the process. If this bill were to be approved, what would happen is that the city would no longer have the ability to restrict the type of landscape materials and plants that are used in new developments that come online. Currently, we have ordinances that regulate this, mostly to ensure that we keep the character and nature of each area of the city intact. Also, it does limit the amount of non-native species that tends to use more water than local plants. And so based on that measure, we oppose, or staff opposes, House Bill 2570.
I think the issue, though, my understanding is the staff is recommending because they feel that this is an issue that the city should decide, not be dictated by the state legislature, is vegetation requirements. Mr. Remus.
Mayor, council, that is correct.
All right, do we have any questions, members of the council, on HB 2570? Do we have a motion on that bill?
I'd move to oppose.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That item passes. Next item is 1241.
Correct. Letter G, Senate Bill 1241. This showed up as a strike everything amendment recently. And this bill has multiple aspects to it. The primary areas that staff was concerned about dealt with recycling programs. Currently, the city of Phoenix has a 40 by 20 goal, making sure that 40% of recyclable trash be diverted from our current landfills, and council's developing those programs as we go forward. Under this bill, currently written, it would preempt us from having, or the council to have, the ability to try to achieve goals similar to that when it comes to recycling. And for that, that's staff as opposed to Senate Bill 1241.
Well,
all right, Councilman, please.
It goes more than that. It's nice to talk about the recycling part, but the bottom line is what this bill does. And the council was able to see this, and the public was able to see it, and it's because I helped alert the business community to this. The city of Phoenix is embarking on a path, and one part of its plan on this 2050 plan that it had was to monitor individual utility use, basically spy on the public, find out what you're using for utilities, and then be able to maybe sometime in the future, just like they do on the East Coast, combine and impose rules and regulations on them. To vote for this basically says that it's okay to do that. I don't think that it is. I think the public has a right to their personal privacy, and we should not be involved in knowing and monitoring what the people do, whether it's on recycling or whether it's on utility use. We should not be in their face, and we should not be in their homes. That is their private right to do that, and government has no reason to be involved in their private usage of anything. It's not our responsibility, and it's not our mandate, and this stops the government from literally getting involved in your private business. business. Thank you, Mayor.
All right, thank you. Any other additional comments on this bill? Do we have a motion on our position on SB 1241?
Move to oppose 1241 to protect local control.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
No.
Mayor, can I ask a question
Yes, of course.
about that one?
Yes.
I had not heard Councilman DeCicio's explanation at all, but it seems like there are other components in here that have to deal with recycling, the donation bins on property, and some of the other things that we regulate. I'm just concerned. I'd like to have staff come in tomorrow and give me an in-depth explanation covering the entire bill and what it covers.
Well, then why don't you hold it off before you vote for it? I mean, for real, because what this does here is we literally brought this up. You heard the business community, you heard the private sector come in and say they did not want their lives, their businesses monitored by government.
I haven't heard that.
They were at the council meeting here when we were talking about this
I must have
plan,
been absent.
the 2050 plan.
Okay, so I think the staff recommendation is that we oppose it for local control reasons. Obviously, Councilman Williams wants a briefing because she personally may try to motivate more opposition because of the devastating impact it would have on our sustainability, overall our sustainability programs. Does anyone else want to hold off on the vote, or should we vote today? Because obviously this bill is moving, and we've got to, if the City of Phoenix is going to have a position on it, now's the time. Vice Mayor, or excuse me, former Vice Mayor.
I would just say this illustrates, I think, the problem with this system. I mean, the people at the legislature who are elected by their constituents, they probably had a very extensive hearing with lots of testimony in the business community and so forth. We got you reading one paragraph that, at least according to Councilman DeCiccio, was leaving out big chunks of the story. And now we got another councilwoman who's kind of confused about what this does and so forth. Every one of these votes, I don't know why we do this. It seems misguided. But in any case, we can hold it off, I guess, because then the city wouldn't have a position.
Why vote for something you don't know what you're doing?
Yeah. Yes,
I know what
that's
the bill
an excellent
does.
point.
I was involved in it.
We support. The 2 items out of the 3, I feel strongly we absolutely need to oppose. The 1 item, I'm just not clear on, and I would rather have nothing happen than to support it.
Okay, so we have already taken a vote, but if somebody actually wants to continue this item, we can take a vote on a continuance. Obviously a continuance is effectively a no position on this bill because the bill is moving and this session is going to not last very long, and so the bills are flying crazily down there, and if the City of Phoenix is going to take a position, now's the time for us to take a position on this bill. So the motion was to support staff recommendation to oppose this based on local control considerations. That was the second. Do we have a different motion?
Motion to continue till the next time.
Okay, so we have, I'm sorry.
Excuse me, Mayor. Under the chart, the council's actually already voted and approved it. You can, the council may reconsider this item, but under the charter, you have to wait 24 hours to do that. And a motion to reconsider would have to come from one of the council members who voted in favor of it. So under the charter, you actually have to wait 24 hours to reconsider it.
So
I think it's a big issue.
All right, I learned something today. That's okay. So one of the people that was on the affirmative side who voted to oppose the item could ask for reconsideration. We can't do it at this meeting. And I guess we already voted. And before Councilman Williams asked a question, Councilman Williams, I apologize, but did you get your question answered, and are you okay with the vote?
Yes.
Okay. Next item on the, please.
I just want to mention, I think it's good that we voted to move forward on this. It protects our right to have the debate on energy benchmarking here. It says we as the Phoenix City Council know more about the Phoenix building stock and building code, and that we can have that debate here for our community. So I think it's important that we protect our rights to make our decisions for our community.
Thank you very much. Next bill is proposed is the SB 1090. Please.
Mayor and Council, again, staff is recommending opposition to Senate Bill 1090 dealing with neutrality agreements, apprenticeship agreements, and the prohibitions of not allowing the mayor and council to have control over their procurement process on public work contracts. This bill actually was one of the bills that was moving very quickly. It was voted out of the House today, transmitted to the Senate, and will be going to the governor. But with that, staff is recommending council opposition.
All right, do we have questions by members of our council? Councilman DeCiccio, please.
Just to bring up what this bill does and doesn't do, it's nice to be couched that way. What it does, it literally says it stops these labor harmony agreements. The city of Phoenix wants this to happen. It has to have this happen because what's occurring throughout the state, we start seeing it here. One of the many bills I'm involved in, I'm actually having a very successful year this year at the legislature. But what this bill does is it literally stops these labor agreements that circumvent the right to work law. So when you hear the words like, oh, it allows us to do our own procurement, but what you don't notice is that these contracts that are going to be written, if these labor harmony agreements go through, literally circumvent the right to work and put the requirements in there that you only have to hire union contracts, which basically drives the cost up, makes it harder to hire police, makes it harder to hire firefighters. It makes it virtually impossible to do any of those things. The legislature, the Senate, at the House and Senate passed these bills. It's now on its way to the governor. I'm hoping that they sign this bill. And what it will do is literally put the state of Arizona in a competitive position to where we will not be constrained by these labor groups and the union bosses that control a lot of local governments who get their contracts. It prevents it and allows for a clean system to be in place. To vote against this is literally, or to vote contrary to the taxpayers is what it will do. So if you want to protect the taxpayers, if you want to promote fiscal accountability and reform, you can hide it and couch it under local control. Local control means you will be giving these contracts out to only union companies if they end up having their way. Thank you, Mayor.
All right, thank you very much, Councilman DeCiccio. Congratulations on the good year that you were having. Other members of the council, any questions or comments? All right, we have a motion on SB 1090.
Move we oppose Senate Bill 1090 on basis of protecting local control.
Do we have a second? I will second that motion. All in favor say aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed?
No. No.
Okay, roll call.
Councilman DeCiccio? No. Councilwoman Gallego?
Yes.
Councilman Gates?
No.
Councilman Nowakowski? Councilwoman Pastor?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Valenzuela?
Yes.
Councilman Waring?
No.
Councilwoman Williams? Mayor Stanton?
No, the bill fails on a 4-4 vote of the council. Next item.
And the final item under list of local control, preemption local control, House Bill 2419 showed up as a strike everything amendment. This is a bill that basically would prohibit the city from charging the $3.50 transaction fee at pawn shops. That money goes to support police officers, the pawn shop detail and the police department with technology and personnel. And it should be noted that last year, the police department, through this program, was able to collect $760,000 worth of stolen property because of the efforts we have in the pawn shop detail. If this were to pass, losing those revenues would definitely impact the ability for police to be able to continue to do the great job they're doing on finding stolen material.
Thank you very much. I need to correct the record. As the former vice mayor has just reported to me, my vote didn't matter on that because the votes weren't there, but my intent was to vote yes on the last motion, which would have had a 4-4 tie of this council. Still, it would have been an unsuccessful vote of the council, but I did vote incorrectly on that on the item. Thank you for pointing that out.
I was a little surprised.
I appreciate that very much.
I thought our argument swayed you. So.
Councilman Ware. So I guess technically I voted no, and I apologize. I'll make sure very clear that my preference would have voted yes, and even if with that yes, it would have been a 4-4 tie on that item. I apologize.
I thought Sal learned the Jedi mind trick.
Go ahead.
And so that's what the bill does. It would preempt or really hamper the ability of the police department to continue their pawn shop detail and the effectiveness of that unit.
All right, do we have any questions on HB 2419?
Second.
We have a motion to oppose and a second. All in favor say aye. Any opposed?
No.
It passes, so or the opposition passes. Next item.
And then finally, just to bring to your attention, because many individuals from different council offices have been contacting us about this bill, Senate Bill 1419. This showed up as a strike everything amendment. This is a bill that is crafted in such a way that it would allow certain grocery stores over 4,500, or excuse me, 5,000 square feet that meet the criteria to be able to locate within 300 feet of an existing school and/or church. It exempts drive-through stores and also has a requirement that they sell produce. Staff doesn't have a position on this because the bill is currently written. Does not impact city operations, and also the applications on this bill, any licenses that are submitted can be handled by the city clerk's office. But again, it's a policy decision on whether or not these types of stores should be able to locate within 300 feet of a school or church. So it was more of a just to present this to the council because I know there were questions about that.
So are we saying
It was just more of a from staff perspective, because there were questions on this bill. We provided information on this bill as we were requested, so that we could inform not just the council members but also the public as well.
I think this bill is detrimental, especially with liquor stores near a school and a church, and it's getting closer, encroaching closer in those areas. So I don't know what we can do.
Mayor and Council, Mayor and Councilwoman Pastor, we are open to council direction. This is a policy issue. It just staff did not have a recommendation, but we are open if Mayor and Council would.
This was included in the packet, though, this bill, or was it not included in the packet? We may not be able to take a vote on it as a result, but obviously you provided this very important information to us, and each member of this council can communicate with members of the legislature.
Mayor and Council, it was not included in the original packet last week because the original bill that this was on, it had failed last week, so it wasn't moving. However, once we saw that it reappeared over the weekend as a strike everything amendment, that's why we sent a copy of the link to your offices of the bills to notify you yesterday that it was back in the current form.
The last one we just voted on, that's how you sent it to us.
Pardon me?
The last bill we just voted on, that's how you sent it to us, correct? 2419?
That is true. That is a bill that we put on as a strike everything. It was a strike everything amendment that appeared also, and that was also included in your link.
I just want to make sure it's properly agendized so we can take a vote on it. That's really the question.
Mayor, yes, it's been properly posted on the agenda as part of the legislative update, so it is proper under open meeting law.
I move to oppose. Second.
Okay, we have a motion. We have a second. Councilman Warren,
whose bill is this?
This bill is going on because it showed up on a striker. It's being a shooter amendment. That's an approps. And the underlying bill, it belongs to Senator Jeff Dial.
Did they say, is there some example that they're trying to fix? I mean,
yes, Mayor and Councilman, yes. This bill is being led by the Circle K Corporation and their lobbyists. And what they've conveyed to staff in educating us is that as they continue to rebuild new stores, they're expanding the size of their stores. Also, they're building new stores in urban areas where you already have churches and schools that are located. They believe they're having some difficulty getting their stores where they want to site them or to expand current stores. So what they're trying to get at is trying to create a new classification of grocery store in state law that, again, has to have produce. It can't be drive-through. It has to have a certain amount of retail floor space for it to qualify. And those are the exemptions that this bill would allow, would grant them the opportunity to ignore the 300-foot, the current 300-foot exemption or the limit for schools and churches. But that is their intent and their goal.
We've all dealt with Circle K's, not in my district, but certainly I've heard about issues in other people's districts. I mean, has this come up before?
Yes.
It has.
Well, in particular, we just went through one in Westwood, and this is probably where they're trying to get at. This is the one we just recently, I want to say 7 months ago. And so due to the fact that there was a church, they're not able to build right there. So this is.
So there
this
have
is,
been examples in Phoenix. I just didn't know. I remember.
I mean,
sort of
this is
vaguely.
one, and there was another Circle K one.
Mayor and Council, there is another Circle K bill, but this is the one that a lot of council members and staff have been asking about.
And we had an issue, we had a liquor license come before us that was an existing building, but it's literally across the street from South Mountain High School, but because of how they measure the 300 feet, it didn't count, and that was one where they were selling drug paraphernalia, they had pornographic material right across from a high school.
All right, please.
Who's on the phone?
Who is currently on the phone? All right, so it's us only. This is up to us.
Bill Gates.
Councilman
Bill
Gage.
Gates.
All right, so the motion was to oppose. We have a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, that passes. That'll be our position for the remainder. With that, are there any other items?
No, thank you.
So can we add bills?
Can we add bills
Can I bring up a bill?
now? We can, but I think we're about to lose a quorum, so I don't think we can actually then.
Well, we got Bill on the phone.
Okay, please.
So I believe it's 1344, Warren Peterson's striker. I don't know who the underlying bill is, about municipal lobbying.
Mayor, council member John Gonzalez is pulling up that bill right now.
Kind of briefly describe the bill and what it does.
Senator Griffin is the underlying sponsor, and that bill was used as a strike everything vehicle for that.
It's still going, right?
Let's see. It is. It has been caucused. That's the latest action, most recent action that has been caucused today.
It could pass. Could you describe the bill?
If I recall the bill correctly, sir, what it does is that it creates two things. One, that it clarifies that those that are representing a city government and lobbying activities at the state legislature have a fiduciary responsibility. The second thing, or item that bill does, is that while giving testimony, the lobbyist that's representing that city or town would have to disclose the vote to the committee members on the city position and share that information as well.
Okay. So if I voted no, or Councilman DeCiccio, or any of us really go either way, we've all been on the losing side of some of these votes, then you would have to explain 5 people were for it, 4 people were against it. So we're here representing the 5 who won, but there was, division on the council. I mean, this is you specifically, right? It would be you two fellows that would be doing this for the city.
Mayor, Councilman, yes, it would be the City of Phoenix lobbying team.
Or you could say, well, it was unanimous. Everybody, so we're all in agreement.
Well, Mayor and Council should also be notified. It would be also the contract lobbyists that occasionally represent us as well under their contractual duty to the city.
Right. I like that bill. I'm not sure why we'd be against that bill. So I'd like us to take a position on it.
Okay, so as I understand the bill, it creates a fiduciary responsibility saying you have to be honest. And then secondarily, it says that you would have to affirmatively disclose the vote of your council if the council has taken a position on a particular bill?
Mayor and Council, that is correct, and I apologize. The reason it was not included in these reports is because after analysis, we didn't believe that it preempted any of the 3 core values of the City of Phoenix. Also, as employees of the City of Phoenix and the contracts that we have with our lobbying team, we believe we already have fiduciary responsibility, so it codifies something we already have. And also, quite often, at least in my 15 seasons with the City of Phoenix, I've been asked in committee, and we've had some of our contractors asked if there was a vote count, what that was, and we've shared that. It's public record, so because it doesn't meet under the criteria of preemption or change the basics of what we do. That's why staff didn't include.
John Wayne, no one would ever accuse you of breaching your fiduciary duties. No one. I mean, that's not even heard of. So I would make a motion that we put this under bills to monitor. It's obviously an important bill that would affect us. I don't think anybody in this council wants to oppose it either, but we obviously, the weight of our utilizing our lobbying team in the most intelligent way possible, so we put the weight behind the right bills. I think the right motion is to monitor this bill that was mentioned by Councilman Waring.
I'd like to make a substitute to support the bill.
We need to have see if there is a second to the motion to monitor the bill. So the substitute is to support. Is it Representative or Senator Peterson's bill?
Technically, it is a Senator Griffin's bill. However, I understand that it was Representative Peterson that supported the amendment in committee.
Okay, so is there a second to the substitute motion?
Second.
All right. Oh, yeah. Councilman Williams, please.
Never. Well, are you saying if asked, or you have to declare it up front? What the vote was? Because they say they do everything else.
Mayor,
I assume you're not going to refuse to answer even now.
Mayor and Councilwoman, it would put a mandate that we would have to do that. If they were
harm.
It would. So in giving testimony, when we how it would work is we already have to announce who we're representing, what we're there for, and then as part of that, we would have to also disclose a vote count.
My initial impression is that it would be a superfluous bill. Obviously, our lobbying team always acts in an honest manner and doesn't breach fiduciary duty, and obviously that's public information. So, if asked, would support doing that. The question is whether or not it's really of a bill of a magnitude that we ought to put our lobbying team behind it, or not. That's why I think bills to monitor is the appropriate location for it. Okay. Any other comments on this bill? There was a motion was for to monitor. The substitute motion was to affirmatively put our lobbying team behind the bill, so to support the bill and to have our lobbying team work or to work on the bill. Any comments or questions by members of this council? All in favor of the substitute motion, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Nay. The nays have it. So now we're going to vote on the underlying motion, which was to monitor this bill.
Disappointed.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That passes unanimously. Any additional bills? Vice Mayor Waring, former Vice Mayor, I keep saying that. Councilman Waring. Any other bills? Anybody else bring up?
Real ID.
What's that?
Are we on the record in support of Real ID?
Of what?
Mayor and Council, that was one of the Council report recommendations in the past. Since that bill didn't move forward, we took it off the list and put it under the bills to watch. We do hear that a version will be coming back to an appropriations committee sometime in the near future. But we do not have a bill number for that at this time.
Well, I think it should be the policy of the City Council, since we operate an airport, that people be able to fly with their Arizona driver's licenses. It will create a lot of unhappy people at our airport if they show up and are told they need a passport.
All right. Is that a motion?
I move that the city support Arizona licenses having the option to be Real ID compliant.
Second.
We have a motion. We have a second. Any comments by members of this council? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? No. That passes.
Wait a minute.
Oh, Councilman Gates, are you still on?
Yes, I am.
Okay, so that motion passes. Any other bills that someone would like?
Oh, no. We only had 4. Don't you need 5?
I asked all in favor, say aye.
I said no.
And there was only, and then there was.
There were 5 of us present, one on the phone.
Okay.
Even if he voted yes, which I haven't necessarily clearly heard, that's only 4 votes.
I don't think I think Councilman Gates, as he has every right to do, stayed silent on that issue. Did you vote?
I voted.
Yes. I'm a yes, and she was yes. So there's 3 yeses.
Don't you need 5 votes to pass them?
Yeah, Mayor.
Oh, I apologize.
You need 5 votes. So
you are correct.
You don't think we should have an option to fly with an Arizona driver's license?
No, I just don't think we should be throwing big bills out here willy-nilly.
Okay, fair enough. All right. Any other bills that someone would like to throw on the table or random thoughts you'd like to vote on? All right, this meeting is adjourned.